Good afternoon and welcome to the Beverly Hills School Board of Education meeting. Today is October 27th and it is 5:06 p.m. I'm going to ask Mr. Mead to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
With pleasure.
Thank you.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Okay, so at this moment, I'd like to have an approval of the agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, and we're going to move the teacher spotlight to before public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. Thank you, Mrs. Walker-Schuman. Okay, so before we do that, can we have a vote to approve the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Dr. Breggy, at this moment, before we move on, can we get a report of closed session, please?
Yes, the board has approved the settlement agreement for employee number KT0838313.
Thank you for that, Dr. Breggy. At this moment, we will go to Spotlight. Who's going to lead?
I would be happy to lead.
Thank
So
you.
first of all, thank you, President Hacker and Mr. Margot, for moving this to the beginning. I know that Ms. Chavez has a youngster at home that she needs to get to. So thank you so much for that. I'm really excited to be here tonight. It's been an exciting, obviously different beginning of this year. We're at the first quarter mark now already. And the learning that is happening at the high school, we could not be more proud of the work that we're doing, what the work that the teachers are doing, the students, the parents. It's really been remarkable. You can see it when you go into the classrooms. You can see it in the data that we're producing. There's just remarkable things happening. And the thing that I think has been so special about this year is not something that's new. It's felt more, which is the partnerships that are happening between teachers, between our I-4 coaches, between the different unions. We're really leaning on each other this year more than we ever have before. And it's really had some really special results. And it's happening across the board. Tonight, we're going to showcase Ms. Cassandra Chavez and one of our I-4 coaches, Nancy Minicozzi. And we're going to highlight what's happening in our biology classes, but we're also going to highlight the partnership that's happening between the I-4 coaches and individual teachers, and the partnerships that are happening with entire departments. So the biology department, which includes environmental science, biology, honors biology, and the MSA, are really working together, the five of them, to calibrate and figure out how we're going to take the excellence we have in the regular classroom and translate that into the digital world. And it's happening, like I said, in all departments, but it's really special what's happening in biology. They're doing incredible work. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is that partnership, but also a very specific thing of how we're doing virtual labs in this distance environment. You know, when you think of labs, you think of the beakers and the Bunsen burners and the things like that, or maybe the parachutes and the rockets. So how do we make that? How do we replicate that in this virtual environment? And like I said, the work that the biology department is doing, and I don't just mean bio, all of them, working together using different technologies has been astonishing. And we see the results not just when we visit the classes, we hear about it from parents and kids, and we actually can see it in the data that we're producing as well. So we're super, super proud of what's going on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy Minicozzi, who's our I-4 coach, one of two. And I have to say that Nancy and Karen, our two I-4 coaches, are, I think, unanimously considered the MVP by all our certificated staff. They are doing incredible work. We could not do this without them. And all of our successes can be tied to their work with individuals and departments. So Nancy, take it away.
Thank you. That's such nice words. I'm going to share my screen here. So you should be seeing my presentation. So I'm Nancy Minicozzi, and I'm thrilled to be here today presenting with Cassandra.
I'm Sandra Chavez. I teach biology at the high school.
So we're here today to talk to you about the partnership that is taking place and what this partnership allows us to do. The I4 coaches and the teachers work together, and it enables us to deliver engaging, rigorous instruction, even as we are in distance learning. The I4 coaches are available 4 times a week for office hours, and teachers come in, they make appointments. We offer professional development, but we try to make it meaningful. So not just how to use the tool, but why to use the tool, best practices, how to incorporate the different resources meaningfully into the curriculum so that we get maximum engagement, offer differentiation, allow students voice and choice, those kinds of things. And there's so much out there that we try to help out the teachers as much as we can, selecting the correct tool that's going to work for them.
Yeah, like Nancy said, there's just so much out there. It's bananas to have the time to be able to go through it all and figure out what works for us. They really make the cereal aisle like a lot smaller. You don't have to go down the aisle and feel super overwhelmed, and it's curated so that they know what works and what doesn't. And it's just giving us confidence in our classrooms to be able to use these tools because we're getting the support that we need from them.
Thank you. Yeah, and we try to be open and approachable and allow people to do whatever they need. We can help you plan, or sometimes we're just thought partners. Will this work? And so really we have so many different tools and platforms, and I'm sure you've heard of all the different names that I'm going to show you on the next slide, but really it looks different, it feels different, but the point of all these tools is really to replicate what happens in the face-to-face classroom. We're still delivering instruction. We're still assessing students, formative assessments, summative assessments, creating that classroom community and that engagement. The tools that we have allow us to collaborate teacher to teacher. I know Mr. Mead talked about that. Teacher to student, student to student. Allows us to differentiate, and we're going to still be able to use these tools when we go back to school, whenever that is, when we go back face to face.
It's allowed us for us to reimagine the learning environment. So what we're doing here virtually, I can easily see us taking it and reimagining, face-to-face learning by using these tools. There's a lot, it's a lot easier to formative assess the students. It's a lot easier to get engagement. We're able to interact more, and it's really informing our teaching and the students learning that they're doing on their own.
And so we've provided training on all of these tools. We have even more. We're so grateful for everything that we have. The I4 coaches have trained and supported these tools, among others. Not every teacher is asked to use every tool. Part of our job is to help teachers discover the ones that are going to be best suited to their students, their content, their lessons, their learning targets, their teaching style, and also their technology comfort level, which I have to say is really increasing across the board. The tools that are used vary from teacher to teacher, from class to class, a lot of times from day to day. What works today, maybe tomorrow, the teacher will want to use something different, and that's okay. And so we're going to talk a little bit about just how it's used in the classroom. This is our other I4 coach in the picture there, Karen Lagola, who we collaborate all the time, all three of us. So Cassandra is going to share a little bit about how we work together as a team.
So like Nancy was saying earlier, she has office hours along with Karen, drop in, and then on Fridays they have optional PD. I've gone to them for everything from help me, my Aries is a mess, to why isn't my Google Classroom doing what I need it to do? How do I plan this lesson? How do I fix that? How do I create this? They're really exceptional, and I'm not kidding, exceptional creative problem solvers. I come to them with a problem and they have like 3 different solutions for me. So it's been a great, I think, collaboration between us.
And it's fun. We never get bored.
It is fun, yeah.
So we just have a little bit of a screenshot of some of the tools here that Cassandra uses.
So a typical day in my classroom, my students come in and they answer a daily question. It's kind of a social emotional learning piece where I ask them emotionally how they're doing, physically how they're doing, so that I can get a snapshot as to like how in the trenches are we going to be that day. They have an agenda that they can look at that I made in collaboration with Nancy when I was struggling with how do I post everything that I want to post without having to change a million things, repost things when I wanted to make just minute changes to something. So it's been very helpful. I've used Jamboard in the classroom as another social emotional learning piece where the students kind of like as an anticipatory set to get the kids thinking about their own thinking. So like metacognition, and I'm trying to change their mindset this year from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And so I was priming them for this activity, and it's something that we go back to and revisit constantly. We're also using Edpuzzle a lot with the benefiting directly from Kyle Kobe and his amazing PowerPoints that he creates for our biology department. And then, you know, I think the first thought that all the science teachers had when we were doing this distance learning was, how are we going to do labs, right? That's a huge component to our classroom. And honestly, Gizmos has been this great solution for us. It's there for us. It has all the supplies we need. I don't have to set up a lab. I don't have to clean up a lab, which can take a really long time. If you can imagine, you know, test tubes for 5 classes. I can pop in and out of class, out of breakout rooms, and I can see the students working. I can see their screens when they're sharing them with me and each other, and I can give them direct feedback. So it's been really interactive and beneficial, and just so useful. I don't know if I'll ever go back.
Yeah, it's really great. And another thing about Gizmos is that they are aligned with the Next Generation Science Standards, and it's really easy to search. I know that Cassandra was saying, oh, I needed something on DNA, and I just looked and I found this thing. It was perfect. And I think you said you were going to use it twice, right? Once now and once later.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to use it. I used it today as like an introduction to nucleic acids. And then when we move on further into the semester, we'll learn more about nucleic acids, and then we can do the second part of the lab, which is pretty neat to be able to use it in that alignment.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and Cassandra's going to do a little demo so that you can see what it would be like in her classroom.
All right. So this is what a Gizmo screen typically look like. It's not super kind of interactive looking. It's not all like crazy. There's not a lot of directions on here. The students actually will get like a paper lab or a digital lab to go with this, and it will kind of guide them in a procedure. I'm also I'm setting it up for them, and I'm demoing it for them to demonstrate what goals I have for them. And so today our goal was to learn how to build a DNA molecule because the students were struggling with what are the components of a nucleotide? How do I know the base pairs? What do they pair with? And so normally in the classroom, we would have created a paper model, but we didn't have that option. And so Gizmos provided a solution to that. So I went ahead and I created the left side of our DNA molecule here. And so you can see there's some supplies for us over here. We have a nucleoside and we have a phosphate. And so the students, they would have just dragged over their nucleoside and attached it And then they would have dragged their phosphate over. What I love about Gizmo is it's self-correcting. So you can see that I put the phosphate, I put it in the wrong spot, and it tells me why I put it in the wrong spot. And then it gives the students an opportunity to place it in the right spot so that they can inform their learning. And then next, what the students would have done was they would have created this complementary stand on the right side. And so they learned that A, or adenine, pairs with T, thymine. And so what I would ask you guys, and this is kind of how to make it more interactive in our classroom, is if A pairs with T and C pairs with G, private message me. What nucleotide do you think would pair with A? Would it be A, B, G, or T? Which one do you think would pair? Knowing that adenine pairs with thymine and cytosine pairs with glycine. Well, thank you, Nancy. Nancy says that adenine pairs with thymine. So I'm going to find my thymine and I'm going to pair it up with my adenine. And you can see that they bond together. They create like a little bond in between them. Okay. My students also learned that a nucleoside becomes a nucleotide when we add a phosphate group to it. So they're learning these small component pieces. And again, it's self-correcting. If I try to pair cytosine with thymine, it wouldn't work. Or if I try to pair guanine with and thymine together, it wouldn't work. So it's really great for these students. They're able to go through it with each other. I'm able to pop in and see how they're doing and provide them direct feedback. And so at the end, they would have had a complete DNA model and then we would have communicated about what we learned in our lab together.
And the students really enjoy that. We have one more slide for you just with some of the student feedback. Let me find, okay, should be.
So while Nancy's finding that, so typically after a lesson, I have the students do some type of reflection. It's this larger goal that I have where the students are really learning how to think about their own thinking. So essentially like metacognition. And so by the students reflecting on what they just did, they're able to reflect on what they've learned and what I've taught them. And I'm also to inform my own teaching. So if all my students say, oh my gosh, that was the worst lab ever, I'm so confused, I don't know what's going on, we need to review, then I would know the next day that I need to demo this step by step, very slow, and go through everything. And what my students, their reflections today were that I got a better visual. The gizmos really helped me see the step-by-step process. They felt more confident, which is half the battle, right? And I also had students say, oh my gosh, I could go back and use the gizmos again if I needed to practice learning this concept. So I just really found it very helpful, very useful. And it's really a great way to do what we need to do in this digital learning environment.
Cassandra, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing just a snippet of what's happening at the high school. Please note how many ways she and many of our teachers, hopefully all of them, are using technology to check in on students socio-emotionally. They're using some really colorful, interesting things like gizmos to help the students learn with self-correcting feedback. And one of the things you may not have noticed her say is this private chat method of assessing students right there in the moment has been so incredible. I've seen it in the majority of classes I've seen where a teacher will ask a single question and every single student will chat the teacher back. They can't see what each other's writing. So the teacher can say as they're coming in, great job, Bob, you might want to relook at your negative, should be a positive. You know, they can give individualized feedback in the moment while it's happening, assess whole class learning. And she said another thing, I want to take this back to the classroom. And that's going to be the really exciting part is we're going to have a toolkit for learning that is light years from where we were 2 years ago because we have the I4 coaches, because we have the one-to-one computers, and we have awesome teachers like Cassandra and awesome departments like that biology and science, like, who are working together to find best practices. I'm really, really proud of what's going on at the high school. And this is really just a snapshot. Thank you, Cassandra. I know you got to get back to your family and everything, but great job. Love what you said today. And Nancy, again, you guys are heroes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome
Ms.
job.
Hacker, for
Thank you.
allowing us to go
Thank you,
first.
Thank you
Mrs.
so
Chavez.
much.
It's nice to see you, Ms. Miniscazi.
Can I ask Cassandra a question?
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I am Rochelle Marcus, Cassandra. I just want to know a very quick question. How much did you use all this technology before this all started?
Just emerging, I would say. At the beginning, I think I really just used maybe Nearpod, quizzes, Edpuzzle, and, Google Classroom, because we were transitioning away from Jupyter grades. And this has just been like the ultimate PD, like just ultimate.
So thank you again, Mrs. Chavez and Mrs. Minicozzi. Did I say that right?
You did.
Thank you for being with us tonight and for enlightening all of us and for doing what you do so well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All the best.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you. At this moment, we're going to move on to public comment. So I'm going to read the first 5 letters, and we're going to institute a 2-minute time frame for each public letter that was submitted to the board. Letters will be entered into the record. Thank you. So the first letter comes from Christy Fear, and I want to apologize to Mrs. Fear because her letter actually was submitted last time the board met, but unfortunately it got lost in the shuffle of all of the emails, and so it wasn't read. And so I am going to start off with her email. Dear BHUSD community, my name is Christy Fear, and I've been teaching at Horseman for 25 years. I'm currently teaching first grade. I love helping my students be the best they can be academically, socially, and emotionally. I want to share how my students responded to a video that was shared with students at our school-wide weekly meeting last Wednesday. As I'm sure you know, the video was, as I'm sure you know, the video was called "And Tango Makes 3." It was about a penguin couple that adopted a baby penguin and raised her in a very happy and loving environment. You may be thinking that I should have said it was about a gay couple, but I didn't. The reasons I didn't mention the couple was gay was because 1, that shouldn't matter, and 2, that's not the message that my students got from the video. I think it's important for the community to know how my first graders responded to the video. They viewed it as a celebration of family. The video was a beautiful portrayal about diversity and acceptance. After the video, my class of 6 and 7-year-olds had a very nice discussion about how families can look very different from other families, how anyone can become parents, and how the dads took good care of their baby penguin. Honestly, my students didn't bring up anything about how the penguin couple was gay, even though they knew it was about 2 dads. In my eyes, that wasn't the important part of the story. Also, it shouldn't matter if they did bring it up. My students never cease to amaze me, and I think many adults can learn a lot from my first graders. Most families I've encountered over the years at Horseman are very accepting and tolerant of all walks of life. Most Horseman families understand the importance of raising children to be kind and happy people. Most Horseman families celebrate diversity and encourage their children to learn about and embrace all different kinds of cultures and people. Most Horseman families recognize that celebrating diversity is what makes our country.
President Hacker, I'm sorry to interrupt that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Fear, for submitting your public comment to the board and for sharing your experience. The next letter comes from Edward Montoya. Recently, the Board of Supervisors have said the teacher approval is no longer required for a waiver. Our administrators working on getting one. Our children, especially the younger ones, need to get back to in-person school. Now that the union is no longer an impediment, let's help our children get back safely. Remember, our children matter most, and the last 8 months have been so hard on them. They need social interaction. Teachers should be given proper PPE, just like the private school camp teachers and adventure camp counselors. We must protect the teachers so that they can safely teach. However, there should be no excuse that cannot happen at school. We have been reassured by the superintendent that he has taken proper precautions. Lastly, for those children and parents who do not want to come back to school for in-person, then choose the independent learning option. However, don't stand in the way of the parents who do want in-person learning. And again, that's from Mr. Edward Montoya. The next letter comes to us from April Jurgens. I understand the board is considering requiring special education employees to go back in person school for preschool and prime classes in the very near future. I'm against this proposal for the following reasons. These kids are not only already compromised, but we teachers and aides have to change diapers and do hand over hand to do our work. This close contact approach is necessary for effective in-person instruction, but subjects us to unnecessary risk. One of our aides has a child in the elementary school and doesn't have stable childcare. My husband's ex-wife is undergoing treatment for a serious health concern, and one of our aides' elderly mother-in-law is quite ill. At best, we all take leaves of absence at half or no pay. At worst, we put ourselves and loved ones at risk. In my case, my stepdaughter may not be able to see us at all because I'd be at risk to her mother. I understand that many TK2 kids are going back to school in different districts and private schools, but neurotypical kids have to be toilet trained to attend those schools. Ours don't. One of our students has a difficult time keeping all of her clothes on all day. There's no way she'll keep a mask on. And these kids are 3 or 4 year olds. There is little to no understanding at that age, even for neurotypical kids, of the need to wear a mask, sanitize hands, or cover their mouths when they cough. Please consider what you're asking us. As much as we love our kids and want to and what we do for them, we have our own children and family members whose lives also matter. We're dedicated. We want to see those faces in person every day, but we want to do it in a safe. We want to do it to be safe for us and for them. Let's have them come back to school when it's safe for all of us. And again, that comes to us from April Jurgens. Thank you for your public comment. The next letter comes to us from Telly C. Good afternoon, board members and district administrators. My name is Telly C, and I'm a high school special education teacher. As an educator, parent, and realist, I'm deeply concerned that the district is considering bringing some of our students with special needs back to school, along with the many staff members required to support them. To do this, as we enter flu season and without a vaccine or cure in sight is dangerous and reckless. I am a healthy person with no pre-existing medical conditions. 2 years during finals last week, a student spent several hours in my classroom completing his exams. He was not feeling 100%. He was constantly coughing and sneezing, but it was finals week and we weren't in the midst of a pandemic. He completed his exams. Winter break began shortly after I came down with the flu, overwhelmed with shortness of breath and constant coughing. On Christmas Day, I was taken by an ambulance to the emergency room because I was suffering from vertigo and my heart rate dropped rapidly. I recovered in time for the spring semester, but this experience made me realize the power and speed in which respiratory diseases can overwhelm a person. Now we are faced with an even more dangerous disease, more dangerous than the flu and with less obvious symptoms than coughing and sneezing. Sometimes there are no symptoms at all. It is a disease that has killed hundreds of thousands of fellow Americans, including family members and friends of people I know. It is predicted to kill hundreds of thousands more. Nothing about this school year is ideal. As I write this message, my oldest daughter is going through 3rd grade on her laptop and my 4-year-old is playing by herself. They should be at school. They should be with other students or with other kids, but they should also be safe, and their safety and safety of our staff members must be a top priority. This district prides itself with how—
Mrs. Hacker, I apologize for interrupting. That's 2 minutes.
Thank you. That letter, all the letters will be entered into the record. Thank you, Mr. C, for submitting your letter. The final letter that I will be reading tonight is from Alana Grayson. Dear board members, I want to start by saying how appreciative I am under Mrs. Chisholm's department in special education. I have been with the district since 2009, and I have enjoyed all the teachers, students, and staff that I've encountered as an instructional assistant. I read that the idea of the special education staff may be asked or required to come to school in the near future. This is extremely concerning to me and other instructional assistants. Many of us, including myself, have pre-existing conditions, and Los Angeles County is still not a safe environment due to COVID-19 surges. As we are all seeing across the country, the second wave is approaching, and it seems to be risky to have in-person classes. Medical experts, including Mr. Fauci, have warned that this winter could have devastating effects if we as a nation are not extremely careful. Please take the time to rethink how this could negatively affect staff, students, and the families of those returning to school. Knowing that the population we work with are children, they may have difficulties following the strict guidelines provided by the CDC. We understand how some of these students may be struggling during home learning, and that in person would be greatly help them. But is that the appropriate rationale for putting our own health at risk? I want to do everything possible for our students to reach their academic, social, emotional goals, but not at the expense of my own health and well-being. I'd like to think that I've helped many children over the years and that I am still successful at this task, even during my home learning. I appreciate your time and know the difficult decisions you must make. Please remember that we are all human and that none of us are immune to this worldwide pandemic. I hope you and your loved ones remain safe and healthy, and that we keep our BHUSD family in the same position of maintaining their health and safety as a high priority. Again, that comes to us from Mrs. Alana Grayson. Thank you, Mrs. Grayson, for submitting your comments. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Mrs. Marcus, who will read for us next. Thank you, Mrs. Marcus.
Okay, can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
Ms. Marcus, we can hear you.
Well, you could hear me, but I didn't know if you could, so let me go back to it, okay? Let me get back to it. It seems when I'm, okay, you can hear me, all right?
Yes.
Okay. This letter is written to Dr. Breggy, Dr. Horvath, Laura Chisholm, Dustin Seaman, and the board members. It's from Neha Bachani. I hope I spelled it right, said it right. Special education teacher at Beverly Hills High School. I am writing in regards to the proposal to bring back the moderate, severe population of students, teachers, and instructional assistants. I believe this proposal was rushed and not enough planning has happened for the school building to reopen physically for some of our most vulnerable student population. Please consider and come up with a plan to address the following concerns prior to reopening for the safety of our BHUSD community. First, COVID-19 cases have been increasing significantly in the last 2 weeks. LA County is still in the purple widespread tier. It is simply not safe to reopen at this time. I have a number of teacher friends across the country teaching in various hybrid models. 4 of my friends in these settings have had outbreaks of COVID in their schools, and they have all expressed the same sentiment. Their schools did not prepare enough for this reality. What is BHUSD's plan for when a student or teacher tests positive for COVID? What is the plan for the support for teachers around us? Will additional sick days be provided? What is the plan for testing students and teachers? Will testing be available at the school site? Will it be mandatory for students to attend school in person? How frequent would this testing be? One thing I would like to make you aware of is how hard work teachers have done in order to make live BHHS an enriching learning experience for our kids. Many students have expressed that they prefer learning online and are doing much better without the lack of distractions at school, with no distraction. Many students have also expressed feelings of anxiety toward going back to learning in person prematurely. Teachers and students would need to uphold social distancing while teaching in person. Please keep in mind that teaching in person with these safety parameters does not differ
I'm sorry
greatly.
to interrupt, Mrs. Marcus. That's 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was from Neha Bachani. Thank you very much for your letter, Mrs. Bachani. The next one is from Timothy Briggs. Dear President Hacker, Dr. Breggy, and school board members, I was saddened this morning to hear that there are some in the community advocating for the return of prime and special ed students and their teachers to campus at the beginning of November. This being such a preposterous and dangerous action during the beginning of a new and very deadly wave of coronavirus, I feel sure that you will handle this matter with the wisdom and courage you have shown thus far and act immediately to quell this ill-advised action brought on by a small group, vocal group. Thank you for your leadership, Timothy Briggs. The next comment is from Karen Chandler. Comment, it is too soon. The science that tells us that. I'm also concerned that Beverly Hills seems particularly recalcitrant in following science. Signed, Karen Chandler. The next comment comes from Dan Moriaka. Hello and good evening. My name is Dan Moriaka and I've taught at Beverly Hills High School for the past 16 years. I implore the board to not allow in-person education at this time, especially for our most vulnerable groups, such as special ed. Italy and other countries have reclosed and the US has reached its highest daily numbers yet. California is doing better, but now is not the time to ease up. We worked tirelessly to make virtual learning work, and to try to bring students back and inevitably close again would hinder the work we've already done. As a teacher and a parent, we need to protect our most vulnerable student and teacher alike, and that means waiting until the country has better numbers. We can't control what comes in from other states, so the threat of spreading is still high. My mother-in-law and father-in-law almost died from COVID. Please don't rush and let's examine the data. Thank you for your consideration, Dan Moriaka. The last letter that I read comes from a lady named Carla Perez. My name is Carla Perez and I've been working as a substitute instructional aide for BHUSD for the last 3 years. During this time, I have taken on different long-term assignments that had led me to work with prime class at Horace Mann. Although I love working with the prime class, I believe that going back to the classroom at this moment is putting the lives of the students and staff at risk. I believe that going back to the classroom is a high risk for myself and the children because it is almost impossible to adhere to all the health and safety measures required to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Our students require physical care and contact. Many of our students need assistance with most of their basic needs, such as eating and toileting. Some of our students are not toilet trained and need diaper changes and sometimes clothing changes, which requires close physical contact. Our students have a difficult time sitting for long periods of time and would make the 6-foot distance measure a challenge. Also, for most learning activities, our students need hand-over-hand assistance, which means we must have close contact with them to help them use the scissors, pencils, and other classroom supplies and materials. The students in the prime classrooms have needs that include chewy toys, which mean that the staff and students would be exposed to their saliva. Because we are in such close contact with the students, this makes us vulnerable to contracting COVID-19. I ask you to take into consideration all of the concerns mentioned above when making your final decision. Please take into account that the lives of the children, staff, and their loved ones are at stake. Thank you, Carla Perez. And that's my list, and I turn it over to the next reader.
I think that's me, correct? I'm
Correct.
stepping for Mr. Spitz. Okay. So the first comment is, hello, my biggest concern is bringing back students who are not potty trained, who cannot pull up their own pants, who have difficulty leaving their clothes on, let alone a mask, and putting everyone at risk. I understand an option is to take a leave because not only myself, my IAs and other employees live with people at home with compromising health conditions. As much as I miss the kids and want them to be back, or want to be back with them, I feel there are some scenarios that have not been thought through all the way. Thank you for your time and consideration. And this is from Lynn Gifford. So next one is, Dear School Board, I'm sending this letter to all of the members of the board. I was a resident of Beverly Hills for many years, and my children have gone through the school system. We moved to Beverly Hills primarily for the superior schools. Because of my love for the schools, approximately 20 years ago, I became an IA. That means instructional assistant, initially working in general education and eventually transitioning to special ed. I now work in the prime class at Horace Mann. I'm so disappointed in the school district on your decision that we will be returning to school in the near future. Do you realize that the lives of the students, let alone the teachers and aides involved, are at stake? At the time when COVID is on the rise in our country, it is so irresponsible to expect the children and teachers and teaching staff to return to a potential death sentence. It should be noted that some of our special ed families have shared that they go to the beach, play in parks, have family gatherings, and go to pumpkin patches on the weekends. These families are not socially distancing, and the children can easily be carriers of this deadly virus. If the kiddos return to school, the virus can so easily be spread. It would be very difficult to keep them socially distanced. Some of the children need help toileting, keeping their hands to themselves, eating snack and lunch independently, among other personal needs. The teacher I work with, Ms. Amy Barr, has done the most remarkable job of teaching on Zoom. It should be noted that many of the students have been accelerating with online learning. Every week, parents pick up a bag filled with activities to be done during the week, relating to the theme of the week. If done in school, this would be almost impossible to implement. Many of the activities require adult supervision, i.e. hand over hand assistance in their writing their names, writing letters and numbers, etc., getting supplies ready for activities, using scissors and glue sticks, just to name a few. As mentioned above, snack time and lunch would be a disaster as well. Some of the kiddos cannot eat independently as they need help opening their lunch boxes and even in some cases hand feeding them. How can this be done physically distanced? I can go on and on with different scenarios. My last point I'd like to make is that when we signed up to work for the school district, we were not considered essential workers. No one ever thought there would be such a horrific pandemic.
That's 2 minutes.
That comes from Candy Sussnow. Okay, the next one is good evening, Board of Education members and Dr. Breggy. I am very concerned about the impending return of specific special ed classes. Will these students really do better with in-person instruction and all the protocols that need to be put in place? This will not be a typical classroom environment. Many students are thriving and this could actually impact their positive progress. I wonder if the parents truly understand that an in-person teaching experience will look very different from a pre-pandemic model. I hope that the teachers will be involved in the process of deciding what is best for their students. There are too many unanswered questions and concerns. Please support our special ed staff. Now is the time to make decisions based on science, data, and teacher input. Please make safety for everyone the priority. Stay healthy and thank you. Kathy Bronte. The next one is, I am writing this letter to express my concerns regarding in-person instruction for our students with moderate to severe disabilities. I am concerned about the ability to have our staff and students teach and learn safely. The ability to socially distance and to consistently adhere to health guidelines will be a particular challenge for this population, whom rely on close proximity and assistance with hygiene as part of their regular school day. We have students in this population who have challenges with toileting independently, demonstrate physical tantrums, and running away. Keeping them safe in the school setting will pose a risk to both staff and students. Additionally, while this may not necessarily be the district's responsibility, how will affected staff manage the responsibility of in-person instruction while they have a school-age child on distance learning? Is the district willing to consider options such as creating a childcare pod? This has been created in nearby school districts such as Glendale Unified School District, or allowing an employee to bring their child to school if necessary. The reality is that this is a larger societal problem created by this pandemic. I hope our district can collaboratively look into realistic solutions to support both affected working families and students. Thank you, Raquel Karungkong, school psychologist.
Okay, I got the next few.
Okay.
To whom it may concern, I am writing to express my concerns about a return to in-person instruction for the moderate severe special education students. LA County is still in the purple tier with COVID cases on the rise, and it does not seem to be a safe time to return to in-person instruction. I believe that it will be difficult for these students to maintain appropriate safety regulations in an in-person environment. How is staff going to ensure that everyone remains safe while staying safe themselves? It has been my experience that these students have been able to access online learning, and a return to in-person services will not be a return to normal, thus creating new challenges for these students, many of whom have difficulties with transitions. For my work, I often use facial expressions to give cues to the students, and those will be difficult to follow when I'm wearing a mask and they won't be able to see my whole expression. At this time, it seems too soon to return safely to in-person instruction. Thank you for your consideration in this matter, Eileen Katz. The next letter has 4 people signed, so if you want to do 8 minutes, the 3 other people cede their time, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. Dear members of the BHUSD School Board, the opportunity has presented itself for small cohorts of special education students to be able to return to the classroom. These students have been identified as high risk. The reasoning for this is that certain students in the special education population have not been able to receive adequate instruction through virtual means. For a number of students across our state, the situation is dire. Students have had no or extremely limited contact with educational services since the shutdown in March. But now, as professionals who work with the moderate severe population at BHUSD, we would like to the opportunity to share our thoughts on this and speak to what is happening here in our own district. The district has been very clear in its guiding principles since the beginning of the shutdown. You have listed them in our Ready Together plan. We have been very appreciative of this and your priorities because we think they are correct. Let's start with Principle 1, health and safety. The United States is reporting the highest number of daily cases since the pandemic started. LA County is still in the purple zone and considered widespread. And in the last month, new cases have started to rise again. It has been determined that our current status as a county has not made it safe for our general education population to return to campus. According to our safety protocols, when our numbers go down and it is safe for our student population to return, there are a number of things that will be done or have already been done to make the school site safe. There are also 2 very important things that staff and students will need to do. That is, students and staff must wear a mask and keep 6 feet of distance from each other. This is not enough for us. Unfortunately, this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, and we have yet to see a clear direct protocol that is feasible for the students in our moderate severe classes to be able to return to campus safely. Many of our students in the prime population are unable to wear a mask due to sensory issues or health needs, and they are unable to follow the protocols to keep them 6 feet apart from other students and staff. On a daily basis, some of our prime teachers and IAs are exposed to and have to handle students' bodily fluids, changing diapers, wiping drool, helping the nosebleeds, just to name a few. We have students in our younger prime population that when having a behavioral episode will quickly rip up the protective gear off of staff and students' bodies. We have students who elope and have behavioral issues so severe they require CPI, which involves physical restraints and holds and put staff in immediate close contact with students. With a number of students having difficulty dealing with transition, this will be commonplace the first few weeks we are to return to campus. A number of our staff have had their CPI certifications lapse as well during the lockdown. This could be a huge issue for them to return without being current on this. Students also require hand-over-hand assistance to complete tasks, putting staff in direct proximity to students. There has been a clear specific plans in place for how this is handled because students and staff safety at risk isn't optional. Asking our prime students and staff to return under rush conditions when we are at the highest threat level possible is going to have a direct impact on not only their safety, but the students' educational needs being met. It is not as easy as applying a uniform plan to all students. Just like all of our special education students have IEPs, each of our students need to be looked at individually. Some may not be able to return under the current guidelines. Staff, parents, and administration need to be on the same page. Principle 2, educational rigor and consistency. It should be said students being allowed to return to campus early when the threat level is at its highest has been an important exception for many students across our state. Some districts, due to budget constraints, have been able to provide few supports to their virtual special education classrooms. Some students have had 0 contact with campus staff through countless attempts because their needs are so severe, they're simply not able to access any sort of education through the virtual setting. This is not BHUSD. We are better than this. What the prime teachers have been able to accomplish virtually during the time of distance learning is incredible. Many of our prime parents would be very willing to back that up. We are in their homes. They see what we are doing. BHUSD has provided an exceptional student to staff ratio. They have set us up to be successful in the prime program. That has carried over to our abilities in distance learning. We are servicing students. We are putting in overtime to make this happen. Our teacher at the high school is one of the most organized and effective teachers I've ever seen in action. She had all of her aides trained in our classroom technologies and set them up to teach effectively with her and her aides working after hours to accomplish this in the first week back to school. Let's also note we have some of the strongest instructional assistants working in our prime program. Some of these aides will need to take leaves due to health concerns if we are asked to return. We will be forced to train new staff unfamiliar with our population on top of juggling everything else. In normal circumstances, our IAs are imperative to an effective program, and we can't even imagine how much we will need them in the current circumstance. Our new elementary teacher has been creating weekly learning bags to accompany her units for each and every one of her students so they can have hands-on manipulatives to accompany every lesson. Companies sell similar learning bags online for hundreds of dollars. Our parents are getting these for free from a dedicated teacher working overtime to make it happen in the interest of what's best for her students. Our students are receiving daily, direct, and small group instruction in all of our prime programs. We have set up our rooms to be successful, and we are succeeding. We are proud to present our data to any member of the administration who asks for it to back this up. And we would also be happy for you to talk to any of our student parents on how they think we are effectively teaching at this time. That to us is more important than data. We are in the home to see what we are doing. Principle 3, social and emotional well-being. We have done our best to provide the students with a social outlet where they can see their friends' smiling faces from the high school class on fun Fridays and play games with them. They're participating in By Your Side Club with general education peers after school, led by speech therapist Eileen Katz. We have a weekly yoga class led by our school psychologist, Raquel Karunkang. Our students are settled in with their schedule and look forward to special events every week. We've cultivated some sense of normalcy in an unnormal world. We also want to acknowledge what has been lacking. Our students have not been able to see any of their friends in person. They are stuck inside with only their parents and siblings as in-person social outlet. It's hard on our kids, not even just in the prime program, it's hard on all of our kids. We acknowledge that, and to be honest, our hearts break for our students. Coming back now will not solve many of these issues for a majority of our population. It will look like a scene from a science fiction movie. Students will not be seeing their general education peers. They will be required to be in mass sitting across the room from each other. We also acknowledge the social emotional well-being of many of the parents of our prime students. They have had to step into the place of our classroom aides in the older population. It's juggling the many Zoom links and making sure that they are getting to all their classes and support services on time. In the younger population, it's helping them with their lessons, providing the hand-over-hand assistance to their child as the teacher is leading the activity. This has been so incredibly hard on them, which directly brings us to principle number 4, childcare. Some parents are angry. They are angry because they are tired. They are overworked. They need a break. We get it. They do. We see it on their faces and hear it in their voices when we talk to them on the phone and meet with them. Many of us are parents to young kids as well. If we are eschewing our top 3 guiding principles in the name of our 4th, we should restructure the order of our guiding principles. We want to work for a school district, not just a childcare district. All of these are important factors for us to be taking into account when preparing for all of our prime students to return.
I'm going to interrupt, but that's 8 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to just take a breath. By the way, that comes from Elizabeth Schwab, Kathy Koramian, Phyllis Funches Brown, and Amy Barr. Breath, continue. Please consider the safety of all students and staff. Asking any of these populations to return in person at this time comes with potentially great risk to all. Sincerely, Sarah Wolf, 1st grade, Horace Mann. Letter 18s, there's 2 of them. Dear Board Member Hacker, President Hacker, it should say, I am writing to express my concern over the proposed return to campus for our preschool age prime and special education students. Los Angeles is still fighting a battle against COVID-19, and I do not understand how it can be perceived to be safe for these very vulnerable students to return to campus at this time. In addition to putting them at risk, their families and the staff assisting them will additionally be put at risk. How will these young students deal with returning to school? It is my understanding that staff will need to wear full suits of PPE, masks, face shields, full overall PPE suits. Students may not even be able to recognize their teacher under all of those layers, adding to student stress. Students themselves will be required to wear masks, something that many of these students will struggle to be able to do for any extended period of time. Physical contact will be extremely limited, which is exceedingly difficult for this group of our student population. How will a young special ed needs child deal with all of this? I would imagine they would learn and achieve more in their home environment in which they are comfortable and familiar with. Many of these students are currently achieving very well through virtual learning. Please reach out to these special education teachers. They can give you their professional opinions and the data to support these opinions. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to read this and hope that you make the decision to protect our students and staff by delaying the return to school, Mary White Horseman School. And my last letter, I'm writing this letter today for my voice to be heard. As a special ed educator, instructional classroom assistant, this job requires both safe working conditions for me and my students. These are the few reasons why returning to the classroom or teaching from outside is not safe at this time until it is COVID-19 safe or there is a vaccination in place. There is no 6-foot social distancing. We cannot run nor touch child hands to bring them back if they walk, run away, or wander around. Students cling onto our clothes and arms. They spit, put hands in mouths and nose constantly. They have chewies around their neck and they take out of their mouth and swing it to touch other students with. Bathroom supervision and diaper assistance, food assistance and feedings, etc. For the most part, many of these small children need to be caressed. Their crying is uncontrollable due to sleep disorders, medications, nonverbal, language barriers, having a bad day. They don't want parents to leave. They want to go home. They're simply tired and fussy. And we as one-to-one adult mothers need to step in and comfort the child's student to turn their bad day into a good, positive learning day. In conclusion, my concern is that there is no concrete guarantee safe work conditions as required by labor laws. Thank you respectfully, Carrie Jimenez, Horseman School. Thank you, Noah out.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. I believe that we asked student board member Yoni Kashanian to help us read some of these letters. Did you receive the email? Yeah,
Yes,
ready?
I have.
Thank you so much for helping us out tonight.
Of course. So number 20, dear Miss Hacker, at this point in time, a return to in-person learning for our most vulnerable students and the staff that cares for them is not appropriate. There are far too many concerns when it comes to safety and education quality. LA County remains in the most restrictive purple tier, indicating widespread infections. The timing of a return would coincide with flu season and the beginning of colder fall and winter months. During these months, there will be holidays and breaks. These are holidays that typically involve people gathering with those outside of their households. This is just one of the many reasons that doctors and scientists have been concerned and have warned about a potential winter surge for months now. Our first fall and winter with COVID-19 combined with flu season is simply not a good time to bring back any students or staff. The safety measures that would need to be taken are numerous. I have worked in our district's moderate/severe special education classrooms for years now. The way these classrooms function and the needs of these particular students makes adhering to current guidelines extremely difficult, if not impossible. Further complicating matters is the CDC's October 21st updated definition of close contact. It is now defined as being within 6 feet of a person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. Our students require staff to be within 6 feet of them for the majority of the day, every day. Many of the students are still learning how to cover a cough or sneeze and how to wash hands. Precautions such as masks create communication problems by muffling voices and covering facial expressions. Plexiglass creates a barrier that prevents required assistance from being delivered. Materials and objects commonly used to teach can't be shared or would need to be constantly disinfected. In-person learning would be drastically different under these circumstances, and the quality of education would suffer as a result. As it stands now, distance learning provides the opportunity to mirror a typical school day virtually. Students are able to participate in a full day consisting of group lessons as well as receive one-on-one assistance from teachers, instructional assistants.
Student member Shanian, but that is 2 minutes.
No worries. That's from Amanda Jones. 21, dear Board President Hacker, distinguished board members, Dr. Breggy, Dr. Horvath, Mr. Seaman, and Mrs. Chisholm. I first want to thank you for your tireless efforts in keeping us safe while we continue a tumultuous journey through this new territory of distance learning. The new signage installed at our sites, new safety protocols, and safety trainings for staff are very much appreciated as we need to responsibly plan as much as we possibly can for the eventual return to campus. Even as we see neighborhood districts physically returning to campuses, we are a unique and very small community with vastly different needs and the ability to make a more responsible decision given these different resources. I know that many teachers would love to go back to normal and teach in a more familiar way, but we must be absolutely sure that it is safe and responsible to do so. The recent changes in state guidelines for reopening schools have made it easier to reopen our schools to special cohorts of students, particularly our prime and special education students. And while I realize these students need highly specific accommodations and resources, bringing students, teachers, instructional assistants, and support staff back to campus at this time still seems very high risk, given the surge of COVID-19 cases around the country and the prediction that cases will continue to rise once we transition to cooler weather and gather with family members over the holidays. The fact that LA County is still in the purple widespread tier is a red flag that suggests it is not safe to physically return to campus at this time. We have enough resources in our district, enough support staff, enough technology to support a continuation of safe virtual instruction in BHUSD until LA County safety guidelines deem it safe to physically reopen. It seems unfair to try out this return to campus on a cohort of our most vulnerable students, our preschool age, prime, and special needs students. These are our very youngest children and are very often not responsible for their own bodily fluids. They require many aides, support staff, and teachers to be in close physical contact, not only for their education, but also to help.
And that's 2 minutes.
No worries. That's from Miss Terranova. And lastly, number 22. Dear Miss Hacker, I am writing to you on behalf of my colleagues and children who could be called back to campus. Not only are our small group of children vulnerable, but so are my colleagues. Are we prepared? Are the ventilation systems at each school site up to code? Are the classrooms completely sanitized with the proper products? Are all the desks sanitized? Are all the personal protective items available? This group is not the best group to begin returning to campus. How are we able to keep 6 feet apart? How are we able to use hands-on support if we are 6 feet apart? They need this close support. They need to know we care. Please reconsider. The time is now. The time is not now. Thank you. Linda Omansky, Instructional Assistant, 41 years of service.
Okay.
You're muted.
Yeah, so thank you so much for reading. Yoni, we have one more letter that was missed, and so I'm going to read it now. This person is anonymous. To BHUSD board members, I am a parent of a child at Horseman Prime Special Education who would like to stay anonymous. Thank you for taking the time to review and consider my letter. I know one of the major topics today is discussing the possibility of opening school facilities for our children. My child is currently at Horseman Special Education with Mrs. Barr's prime class. I strongly believe that when it comes to reopening schools for prime classes, we would carefully need to assess what the risks are and what it takes to bring them back to school. A child will require a COVID test to return to school, which will be very difficult. A child with sensory issues would have difficulties and could have traumatizing experiences during a nasal and oral swab. Prime class teachers, our staff members, work very closely with the children, with the staff wearing protective gear like masks, face coverings, and surgical gloves. It would be very difficult to control the classroom environment. Caring for a prime class student can be hands-on most of the time, and the children are not trained, or even if they are trained on the COVID protocols, they would have difficulties with masks and plexiglass barriers. Prime class is where students come together to interact, and it would not make sense to have them interacting in the current state or of uncertainty. There are many obstacles in preparation for the prime staff prior to COVID, but with COVID still in full force, I disagree in bringing prime class students. All prime class students have difficult circumstances and needs. Without the full support prior to COVID, they should continue with virtual learning, which at this point is a routine that they are familiar with and understand. Thank you. Okay, and that concludes our open public comment period. And now we're going to go to staff presentations by, I believe that Mr. Wade is going to lead us in this discussion. Mr. Wade Roach.
Yes. President Hacker, members of the board, I have a short presentation for the board tonight. Thank you, Ms. Starkins. We're going to focus on 5 areas. Next slide. The COVID-19 resources and expenses through the middle of October, enrollment, classroom staffing and class size, the impacts that the pandemic have had on our general fund operations and food service operations. Next slide, please. As you remember, we will receive this year about $2.4 million in one-time funding to address the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of acronyms on this slide. I'll go over them. ESSER is Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Response. LLM is Learning Loss Mitigation. SB 117 is Senate Bill 117. Any of the resources here, if they start with 3, like 3210, 3215, 3220, that indicates that's the federal funding. Any resource that begins with 7388, 7420, that indicates state funding. But you'll see here about $2.4 million in expense revenues. And then expend by dates. So a couple of these categories have expend by dates of 12, 30, 20, which is very important to know because we have to expend those funds by that date or we have to send those back to the funding source. So you can see here through the middle of October, we've expended about $962,000 of these one-time COVID revenues. We've encumbered another $833,000. So the funds remaining to the district that are not encumbered or expensed are only about $600,000 as of the middle of October. We feel comfortable that those funding sources that have to be extended by 12/30 will be expended by 12/30. Next slide. Enrollment. So in October, we do our official census of our students. And you can see here on this slide, these are our enrollment by grade levels compared to last year. And you can see the variance from this year compared to last year. And you can read through this slide on your own. You can see that we've dropped about 227 students when compared with this time last October. Next slide. And then here are those same numbers by school site. You'll see Hawthorne Elementary, a drop of 46 students, Horace Mann, 66 students, Beverly Vista Middle School, 83 students, the high school, 42 students. We actually have 10 students currently, or as of the middle of October, registered for Moreno High School. At this time last year, we had 0 students in that program. We have the same number of non-public school students. So once again, in a different format, we see a drop of 227 students. Next slide. Just as a reminder to the board and to the public, these are our staffing ratios. These have not changed. Our transitional kindergarten staffing ratio is between 15 and 21 students per teacher. Kinder through 3rd grade is 23 students per teacher. 4th and 5th grades, 29 students. 6th through 8th, also about 145 student contacts. And 9th through 12th grade, 145 student contacts. So when we look at classroom staffing currently, what we see here is at Hawthorne Elementary School, how you read this, that first column there after the name of the school is the number of full-time equivalent teachers, regular classroom teachers, not special ed teachers or PE teachers or EL teachers or Title I teachers. So you'll see so for example, when you read this report, you'll see Hawthorne Elementary School, transitional kinder has a 9-to-1 ratio, so 9 students for that 1 TK teacher. The K3 class size average, the max is 23-to-1 as we just talked about, but at Hawthorne it's 18-to-1 currently. 4th and 5th grade is 23-to-1. And you read the chart as you go down the same way. And you also here on the bottom of this chart, you'll see the ILC, the Independent Learning Center, where you'll see class size ratios of 18-to-1 and 15-to-1 for elementary and secondary contexts that equate to about 27-to-1. Next slide. So we've had some positive impacts, if you will, from the COVID pandemic. Because our staff and our students are not at school sites, we've had some reductions in expenditures. So for example, teacher substitutes, Through the same time last year, we would have expended $103,000 in the equivalent time period. And this year, we've only expended about $16,000. So there's a variance of $87,000. Classified support overtime, last year at this time, we had expended over $103,000. This year, only about $44,000. Classified support substitute, we had expended about $43,000 last year this time. This year, we've expended $0. Materials and supplies, last year, this time we expended about $210,000. This year, about $93,000. A lot of that's the reason is because we've gotten monies from COVID funding for specific distance learning, and we've used that instead of the normal pot of funds that we would use for materials and supplies. Conference and travel, of course, with the restrictions in travel and gathering, that has gone from $54,000 this time last year to under $1,000. And of course, our utilities have been reduced because we just don't have as many lights turned on, and we don't have students and staff using water. So that's seen a reduction. Next slide. And then finally, cafeteria. Going into the budget adoption, we were unsure about what our revenue was going to look like during this pandemic. So we adopted a budget with $635,000 in revenue. Actually, our revenue has gone up. A shout out to the director there, Heather, and her team. They're doing a great job promoting the food service program. We're up to over 450 meals served equivalent per day. The projected revenues have gone up by $254,000. Expenditures have gone up also, not for staffing, but for food, because we're serving more food than we had projected. So we have to spend a little more money on our food products, but the operational impact has been a positive of $159,000. So, looking for a silver lining, we've been able to promote our food service program and get those products out there, and it's been a real success. So at this time, if the board has any questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Roach, for that presentation. We'll start off with Mr. Margot, if there's any questions. Mr. Margot, none?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Kashanian, I'm sorry, I skipped you again.
No worries, no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spitz.
No, I appreciate the report. It's interesting and unusual information. So thank you, Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Mrs. Walker.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the report. And just a reminder that this is not normal circumstances, that report is a unique circumstance. So not something we should get used to.
Mrs. Marcus.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Have we received the allocation of $2.5 million yet from the state for the COVID funds? Have we received those funds yet?
Yes, I believe we received about 80% of them to date. It may actually be a little more at this time, but about 80%.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out, that the class sizes at the elementary, where the average is like 18 to 1, those numbers are well below the what we have as the standard of 23 to 1. And you must remember that an average is always made up of numbers below and above. So we have some classes that might be very, very low in enrollment in the elementary school at both Hawthorne and Horace Mann. I just wanted to make that point, that because they could go up to 23 and we're down at an average, those numbers are probably less. There are some classes that might be quite a bit less than 18, or maybe a little bit more than 18, but there are some classes that are much smaller because an average is just, you take the numbers and divide by. So I wondered about that. At this semester time, and this is just a question, I'm not sure if this is for the staff or not, will students who are in the ILC at the semester, if they would like, can they opt at that point to switch to live Beverly Hills if it's still there? Can they change? That's what I was wondering. Do we know that?
I may defer that to Dustin or Dr. Braggy.
I'm here. It's Dustin Seaman. Yes, Mrs. Marcus. So by law, we have to give the opportunity for application at semester to either return back to live at BHUSD or apply to enroll into the ILC. For independent study, it can only be a semester-long contract. So in middle of November, there will be communication out to all of the ILC families and live.
Okay, that was the question that I had for that. And I think that other than the fact that the alarming loss of students is so high, that's the end of my question, just to comment on that. That was all those are my questions. Thank you. And thank you for the report, Dr. Wade, Mr. Wade. That was really very informative, and it was presented the way I could really get into it. So thank you. I was really scrutinizing it, as you can tell.
Thank you.
I had a question. Thank you, Ms. Marcus. Mr. Roach, where the student enrollment data was configured, I just wanted to point out or ask, I just want to make sure that we are clear on the information we're sharing. The variance does not has nothing to do with natural matriculation from students moving on, let's say from elementary over to the middle school or from middle school to the high school. These are numbers, these are variances in the actual grades. It has nothing to do with matriculation, or does it?
So no, this is just a pure census count from one year to the next. You do have normally you do have some transitional changes. The big caveat with these numbers for the current year, of course, as the board knows, is the impact of COVID. We have a lot of kids, we think, in kinder and first grade that have gone to private schools, and we think they may come back to Beverly Hills when the pandemic is over. So all these numbers, please take with a grain of salt until the pandemic is over, if you will.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. Okay, there's no further questions. We are now going to move on.
Can I make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Just a minute, Mr. Margo. I'm getting just switching gears here. Yes, we're going to be pulling some. I think some individuals. Does anyone from the board want to pull? I think Mrs. Marcus wanted to pull C, D, F, and J. Anything else?
I want to pull 10D.
10D's already been pulled. Anything else? I want to pull certificated. That's 10B as in boy, I believe.
So we pulled B, C, D. We didn't pull E.
No.
Did we pull J and G?
We're pulling, yes. Let me reiterate, we're pulling B, C, D, F, and J. Anything else? Okay, Mr. Margo, please continue with your motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendars minus items 10B, C, D, F, and J.
I'll second that. Thank you. Okay, so I pulled item, yes, all those in favor, please?
Aye.
I will just point out that J, F, D, and C are item 9, not 10.
9, yeah.
Okay, so
it's 9, C, D, F, J, and 10B.
Okay, I'm in my agenda. I'm looking online. It's listed under 10.
I agree with that. I don't have it as 9. 9 is staff presentations. Yeah. So I agree with you, Mr. Marco. Okay, so we have a motion. I think everyone approved. So let's begin discussion. So I am going to make a motion to for certificated item 10B, certificated personnel report.
I'll second.
Thank you. So the reason I pulled this is I'm very pleased to see that we have a Kind Club. I had asked about this earlier over the weekend. I see that we're going to be instituting a Kind Club at Hawthorne School, and the explanation was, of course, that this concept for this club came from ER, and that's really exciting news. I remember that Mrs. Holberg was spotlighted last year, or maybe 2 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago when I first got on the board. I can't remember. It was a long time, and I was really thrilled with the concept and all of the moving parts that are involved in making that program successful. And I think that the students at Hawthorne will definitely benefit. And she is definitely a gem on that, leading that effort. So I'm very happy to see that continuing with reconfiguration. But the reason I pull this is because I asked if the same club was happening or would be taking place over at Horseman, and the answer I got was no, not yet, because we don't have a staff member that's interested. And so I really want to just say that one of the reasons we reconfigured was so that we could have equity and access along both campuses. And so, I hope that this effort of recruiting a staff member to lead the Kind Club or a similar club of its nature will not go unnoticed, and that it will be an effort that will continue. Because I think it's really important when parents start to see one school having one club or an activity and the other school doesn't, the comparison is always obvious, and people ask why not at our school, and it's a hard question to answer as a board member. So I don't want to get into this habit of having one school or just a lack of parity from both campuses. So I'm sure that you're all aware of it, the staff, but I thought it was important to point out. Dr. Breggy or Dustin, do you know if we're making waves in the right direction to solidify a person, or?
So I do know, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about, ensuring that if there's any academic experience, that would be something that we would make sure that was happening at both schools. I think a lot of times when there's a club or activity, oftentimes it is driven by somebody with an interest or a sponsor. I do know that it's not 100%, that there are some things that are happening at Horace Mann that are not exactly the same as they are at Hawthorne. So, but what we do try to do is make people aware and share the availability of what's happening. And our two principals in administration, they work very closely together. So they do share all of these experiences, but while we want very similar experiences, there are going to be sometimes where, there may not be an exact match, and also by interest as well. There may not be interest, from a particular school because students are signing up for something else.
Understood. Thank you, Dr. Breggy. Any further questions on certificated? No? Okay, so we'll call for the question. All those in favor of approving the certificated report, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. And now I need a motion. Okay, I'll make a motion for item 10D, approval of amendment number
C.
2.
C.
I'm sorry, I have it. Yes, it's C. Approval of purchase of thermal temperature screening system. So may I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor?
Are we going to
It was
this?
pulled.
I'm sorry, we're pulling it. Yes, not yet, not yet. So Mrs. Marcus, I believe you pulled item 10C. Do you have a question?
Unmute, Mrs. Marcus.
I was at the Health and Safety Commission yesterday making a report of what's going on with the board, and I happened to mention something about the PPE equipment, and I mentioned this particular piece of equipment, and Dr. Hilborn, who's a member of the committee, was on the Return to Think committee last summer, and he remembered that this was one of the pieces of equipment that they had highly recommended because it will save so much time in determining temperature control when the kids come back to school. So he was very high on it. I just wanted to mention that he remembered that and brought it to the attention as I made my report. So that was just a comment.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions on item 10C? Okay,
I had, sorry,
I'm sorry.
I had asked staff about just the wording on help staff identify any potential carriers of the virus. We know the thermometer itself can't identify what virus somebody has. It can identify whether somebody is sick or not. So I just wanted to make sure that we had that clarification that this is not a specific COVID thermometer.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments before we take a vote? Okay, all those in favor of approving
Aye.
item 10D, say aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda that was taken, removed from consent is item 10F.
10D.
10D, so sorry. 10D, who pulled that?
I will move approval of amendment number 2 to First Tech Inc.'s 2021 professional services agreement.
I'll second.
I wanted to ask about that one because we have approved this person now. This is the third time around. We gave him an agreement to start with for 3 months, and then we came back with an extension for another month, and now we're being asked to give them another 3 months. And I'm wondering, and I'm just curious to know, how long are we going to be able, or how long are we planning to use this person by having this agreement coming back each time? How much work do we have anticipate for him to continue?
So I can jump in here and just let you know that this is an individual employee, so I don't want to single them out too much, but we have a very valuable employee that is working with another organization that is quite valuable to us. And so there are a lot of issues that are taking place with the other company and kind of what's happening around the world with COVID. There's some paperwork issues, but it is somebody that we truly believe in, that is really supportive of our organization and plays a very large piece in what we do technically in our departments. And so it's going to take a little time, but we believe that it's worth it to keep doing what we're doing to try to make this a smooth transition from one company to another.
Okay, any further questions on this item?
Yes.
Mr. Spitz.
Thank you. I will vote to approve this amendment number 2, but I just wanted to point out that there should be a change in the
wording.
I beg your pardon?
In the wording?
No, in the rationale section, it reads the amount here for this 3-month extension is not to exceed. Then it says $33,000 in numbers. Then in parentheses it says $11,000. So that needs to be changed, both in that paragraph, the rationale, and in the financial impact. It reads the same way, not to exceed $33,000, paren $11,000. So both the numbers and the written words should be $33,000. Thank you.
Okay. So does staff want to bring this back, or do you just want to make an amendment, just note that in the record and stipulate Mr. Spitz's recommendation into the record?
Mr. Spitz's point, the actual amendment that we're voting on, not the rationale, is written correctly. It does say 33,000 with 33,000 in parentheses written out in form. So since we don't vote on the rationale, we vote on the document itself. I think this should suffice. I don't know if there's a need to bring it back.
Yeah, and I was going to say it is a timely matter, and because it's a personnel and confidential matter, I'm happy to share with the board at the appropriate time regarding this employee. But yeah, it is time sensitive as far as making sure that we complete this contract.
Okay, so we'll note that in the minutes. It'll be note.
I just want to point out that $11,000 was the amount of the first amendment, was the cost of the first amendment, 11,000, which was 1 month. This is 3 months, and the amount not to exceed $33,000. Thank you.
Okay, so as I was saying, we'll capture that in the minutes. And and you'll report to us, and Dr. Horvath. I think that's acceptable. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. The item passes. Let's see here. The next item is F. So I'll make a motion of approval of agreement with Living Fit Nation. Mrs. Walker Schuman, would you like to second that?
I'll second. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Mrs. Marcus, you had pulled this, and I also pulled it. You'll go first.
In looking at this, I think that it's too open-ended. I don't see a final amount. They list that between 30 and 39 teachers is one price per that amount, and so on, but you don't get a final amount. And then also the number of students, we have no estimate on that. It seems like it's left too open without an amount that we will be capturing. So I'm not too sure that I would like to see it written that way. I don't know how many people are we planning to test. I don't know, but it's to me, there's no number there, and I can't approve the contract without knowing how many people are and what approximately are not to exceed. It's not written into that contract.
So let me just jump in, and Mr. Roach can also jump in as well. What's important now is we've really spent many months working with many organizations on what would be a good fit for us, as far as having a surveillance testing in place, which is in the guidelines and protocols with the public health order. And so we've had a lot of time to work with these organizations and have found that this is the best fit for us. And we've talked to many school districts that are using this organization. And so it's important now to get a contract with them, because everybody is not sure of when the general population, when that big mass of people will be coming back. And so we are putting together a plan that's going to work well for our staff through a regular testing at our sites. And so, that plan is currently in development and will be part of MOUs in the future. But if we're not able to sign on with an organization now and provide a commitment to work with them, many school districts are going to be left out without having anything available.
Okay, so I had a question regarding that, and I do understand your statement, Dr. Breggy, on that issue. I was just going to make a suggestion. Can we, for the sake of approving this, how are you going to do the purchase order? You're just going to do an open purchase order for an undisclosed amount? Because normally everything that comes to us comes with an amount, and if we exceed that amount, then we have an amendment, or we do a round two of increase the purchase order, and the board is informed. So I agree with Mrs. Marcus's. It's just so open-ended. I mean, so why not just adopt an amount? It's like 10,000 or 20,000, whatever the amount is, and then come back to the board as you feel like you're going to start reaching that threshold. Did you consider that? And it could just be open for all the services that are described. Because I know you have different quotes for teachers, different quotes for students, and so forth and so on.
I was just going to say, based on the transmittal, it says that the staff member is going to be billed back to the insurance. Are we expecting them to cover that cost?
So President Hacker, or members of the board, if I can jump in just for a second, maybe I can lend a little bit of clarity. You are correct. The actual costs of the tests for our employees will be billed back to the employees' insurance. So the amount that we're paying for employees is actually the setup of the testing center. And that could vary, on a given day, we may only have 50 employees, but another day we may have 150 or 200. So the cost of that testing event would change and would vary. A small change in the language of this item could be that the funding would come from COVID funding and would not exceed available COVID funding. That way there is a cap. That means that the cost of this testing would not impinge on non-COVID funding. I mean, that's a suggestion, but it's hard to tell at this point exactly how much we would need to expend for testing, given that we don't have a set standard or a schedule yet.
So are you saying that this expense would be charged against COVID-19 funds and not the general fund? Is
Correct.
that what you're saying? Now, let me ask you, just to trail your last statement. Doesn't COVID-19, did those funds expire at any time, or are they just for the entire fiscal year?
A portion of them expire at the end of December, but another portion of them is through, some of them are through 2022. So,
okay, that's good. Again, I just say, okay, great. I think that answers my questions. Mrs. Marcus, satisfied?
One more. What about the part about the children, with the students? That they pay, who's going to be, that's going to come out of our funds of COVID also then? It says that they're students.
Yeah, and that's part of our ongoing discussions as well. And we've not made any decisions, and we've not brought that to the board yet. But we will absolutely do that. We wanted to make sure that we have an organization that, depending on what we select, that the company can actually handle everything that we have that we need to put in place at the individual sites. And so, and that goes for both if there is a student opportunity for COVID testing and staff testing.
I appreciate the explanation about securing a company, and I appreciate that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'll go along with whatever is recommended by the administration, the business.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0.
I will move ratification of purchase order report number 8 for 2021.
I'll second.
Okay. Let's see. All those in favor? Oh wait, we're going to have discussion. Somebody. So thank you for seconding that. Who had the question? Somebody pulled it.
Mr. Spitz, I think, pulled number J, correct?
Well, you said J, I pulled J. I'm sorry. I thought you had said H. I'm sorry, it was me.
This is the purchase order report, number 8.
There was a couple items on there that I would, the change order for, and it had to do with the Metro thing. The second one is also being paid for Metro. There were 2 of them. I don't remember, but one definitely said it was going to be paid by Metro. The second one didn't say that. I was wondering if that was also being paid by Metro. The change order had to do, just said Metro, but it didn't say to be paid by Metro. And the other one was the expense for Dora Dome for $35,000. I know that we use her, but I didn't.
Trustee Marcus, there are 2 change orders for MTA.
Right.
One is reimbursable. The other one is not. So one is reimbursable. The one that talks about reimbursability, but there is one that it appears not to be reimbursable.
But it said something like Metro next to it, so it's a Metro issue. It looked like a Metro issue then. Then I was wondering if that was just left off, that if it's not being reimbursed then.
No, ma'am, it's a different topic. One topic with MTA is reimbursable, but there's other topics that aren't reimbursable.
Okay, Ms. Marcus, does that satisfy your question or your comment?
Well, and then the other one, the large expense for the Dora Dome expense, what we pay that at, she gets it according to, was there not to exceed this year? Maybe Ms. Chisholm can answer that.
Yes, that's generally how we structure it. We have a couple of ongoing cases, and we do some training, such as our Title IX training that we have to update annually. And then it's just billed monthly, and it's a not to exceed for the entire year.
Okay. We have not exceeded that then this year. This was the amount where she has still more to do?
Yes, we're not even close to that amount right now.
Okay, is that it, Mrs. Marcus?
Fine.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of approving the purchase order report number 8?
Aye.
Say aye. That's Passes 5-0. Thank you. And now we're going to go to reports. Superintendent's report, Dr. Brecky.
You. Good evening, everybody. I would like to just talk to you a little bit about some of the changes that have been happening across our county. Some of the revisions that have been changed and have been communicated out to us in the last week and a half since our last meeting. Our small group special ed cohorts and our EL student cohorts. The allowances have changed from the county from 10% to a total of 25% of the entire each school's enrollment. So that has changed. They've increased those cohort sizes as it relates to total enrollment in our schools. In addition, they have revised that it's permissible for if you have a staff member to work with more than just one cohort, they can work with 2 different cohorts. And keep in mind, the cohorts that are allowed to come back are either our English learners or special education cohorts. And then our opportunity for our K-2 waiver for elementary education, that has revised as well. The county has eliminated one of the requirements, which was to get union approval by letter and a parent group by letter to providing consultation with parents and with union groups to be able to apply for a TK through 2 waiver. So today is the day that we are assessed on our Tier 1, our purple status for LA County. There was an uptick in our COVID-19 cases, which keeps us in the purple tier. And so that again comes out every Tuesday. And so that was provided to us just today. So we are still in an area of concern and an area of widespread. This is an area that we've been looking at. We look at our numbers every single day. And we look at our current safety protocols and also the needs that we have in our school district. And so what happens is, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen is, and I try to give kind of a best case scenario for larger groups of students coming back. That seems to be the number one question that I get is, when will larger groups of students, when are they able to come back, even if it's in a hybrid manner? And so we're looking at 28 days from the first time that we are in the tiered assessment that we're 7 or below. So we're at 8 as of today. So the best case scenario is if next Tuesday, if we were at 7 or below, that would then start a 28-day countdown that we would have to ensure that we stay at 7 or below each week in order to then have the opportunity to bring back larger groups of students in cohorts of, well, not necessarily cohorts, but social distancing. 12 students in a classroom is what is defined right now. So that is something that we're, of course, looking at. But I'd like to give you a calendar just so that you can see that even with the 28 days, if next week we were at 7, it's still going to put us in the first week of December. So that puts us into a very interesting month when it comes to instruction. We have finals, final projects. We also have our winter break that's in there as well. So if we're looking at the larger groups of students that are coming back, if we were able to meet the 7 or below in adjusted case rates, we're looking at a December 1st possibility. If we are in a hybrid situation, not to complicate matters, but if we are in a hybrid situation, we are looking at not going to school every day. So if you look at our winter break, final exams, final projects, and a hybrid, students may be back for 3 or 4 different opportunities to have face-to-face instruction. That's the best case scenario. We have had a lot of discussions as a cabinet. We are feeling as if things are going quite well, and to make a change to a hybrid model, if again, best case scenario, first week of December, would probably not be the best time to make that type of change for the limited exposure that students would have to in-person learning. So that we're starting to look at what that would look like for a possible January start for that possible start. And that may happen anyway for us with the county, but it's something that we're following all the time. So some areas that we are working with BHEA, quite well. We've had some really good discussions about special ed assessments for our students. We have visited schools, we've spoken with our staff, and I think that we've really collaborated well on what is the best way to meet the needs of our staff. And it's a combination of some virtual and some in-person assessments for special education students and IEPs and triennials. So we feel really good about that. That's a bit unique and a little different from some other schools, but we feel good about the conversations that we've had, and we're pleased that is something that we will be recommending to the board tomorrow in a special meeting for final approval. We are still having conversations about the small group special education cohort. As you've heard tonight in public letter, a lot of those concerns, that does not come at us very lightly. This is something that we are spending a great deal of time studying, looking at ensuring safety and need and all the things that we're responsible for students and staff. So that does not come lightly. Some other areas of success. We are very close to getting a final TA on an addendum to the MOU through our athletics. And so special thank you to Mr. Ellis and his team and BHEA for helping us fast track this agreement so that we can meet the needs for our youth sports, because that's another cohort group that's allowed back under the public health order. And we feel like we have a really good handle on being able to provide that opportunity for our students to begin some of that conditioning. And so I know that football and water polo are this week, and then slowly each week thereafter, we will have some additional sports coming online for conditioning as well. Again, following the public health order, we have health screening measures in place. And then also I had a conversation with Mr. Ellis today so that we could start having conversations about providing this opportunity again for youth sports, which is in the public health order as an allowance to bring back small groups of students at the middle school level, so that we can start to bring back and have those students come onto our campuses in small groups and begin that conditioning as well. Another area that will be brought to the board tomorrow, and a special thank you to all the people from BHEA on the bargaining team who are working so hard, not only at the bargaining table, but also their full-time teaching responsibilities as well, that we have come to an agreement that our current MOU says that it ends in the fall. And as you can see with the calendar next to us and the purple tier that we're going to be in through December, that we've come to an agreement that this MOU is going to fall into the spring semester. So we need to make sure that we are aware of that and that we take care of that to ensure that the MOU is not only provided for protection, but also for guidance as well. So we're pleased to be able to bring that to the board, and I thank BHEA for all of their work to help us get to where we need to get so that we can set up for semester 2. And then our addendum 1 with special education assessments. Again, that is an area that we have final language on, and we have a TA on that addendum. And I think what's important for people to realize, it's not negotiating the entire MOU. And again, this is working with BHEA as really good colleagues that instead of renegotiating an MOU is to just look at each addendum that will be brought, which will meet some of the needs of the public health order as we begin to transition students back in. So the athletics language, that will be another addendum that's added on when that's finished, which we're really close. And it's a really good way, in a process kind of way, to be able to then add on to our existing MOU. So just really quickly, some areas that I want to bring to your attention that are just changing all the time. I mean, we're getting feedback from many people as people are back in our schools and staff are coming back. We're increasing signage in certain places that make sense. The plexiglass to the left, you can see that we've made some additional orders because it made sense, and staff have made us aware of specific situations in which they feel like that would be a much safer environment for them. So we've made those purchases, and we've taken our time to ensure that that's going to be up and ready. And we actually have most of that already in place. In the upper right-hand corner with Mr. Haas, there are just new products. There are new things that are being developed all the time. This is an electrostatic sprayer, which is it's new, and it's able to spread a disinfectant spray in a wide area, and it's safe to use on different areas, and it does kill COVID-19. And so these are these new products that are coming out and that they've been tested. And so this particular picture, we all went to a training, the cabinet as well, principals, we went to a training just so that we could understand what is being asked of our custodians. And so that was a great opportunity for us to get to know a little bit more about the products that we're using, how they're used, when they will be used. So that's been really beneficial. The below area with the pop-up there is just an example of some creativity when talking about special education assessments and how can we provide an environment where staff feel comfortable and also our students will be comfortable. And so that is just a picture of that we're going to get creative, and we're going to use as much outdoor space as we possibly can. So we talked about this. I'm really thankful that the board has approved this purchase for us with our thermal detection machine. It's really, we spent so much time looking at different companies, different organizations, different products. And we really wanted to find something that was accurate, first of all, but it was also something that we wanted to ensure that was manageable. And then also just looking future down the line, we wanted to ensure that if this is not needed in a certain time, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, what could we do with something like this in another capacity? And it just so happens that this particular company uses cameras that are compatible with our cameras. And so that's really the most expensive part of this machine is this type of camera, and that camera can be used on our existing system was a great sell for us. And so we have reached out to, there's another school district that's using it. We've reached out, we've talked to them, how that's being used. This is just an example. Again, this is, it takes large groups of people, so you don't have to stagger. There's just obviously a handful of us here, but in what you can't see is the temperatures. You can have 50 people walking by, and you can see like the temperature that's kind of above their head from a very long distance away. One thing I want to point out about this that was important to our team is that we didn't want to have an apparatus where students would, and it's very typical, like people that bought products right away, and we didn't, we waited, purchased, many school districts pick like an iPad type product where students either have to go up and press it, or they have to look into the iPad, they have to stop, they have to, you know, be in line, and it takes sometimes 5 to 7 seconds. And then it gives you kind of a pass or fail. It gives you a green if you have a temperature of 100.1 100.4 or less. And it gives you red if you have a temperature. And so it's kind of a pass fail. And so we have learned that that is somewhat traumatic to students as we've talked to our colleagues. And so we really wanted something that was a little bit more discreet. But so that actual screen that you see right there, that the actual television screen, that's actually flipped the other direction, so that when somebody is monitoring, they can actually see somebody coming from a long period of way, and be able to then, if that is somebody that has the temperature above their head that is too high, that student can be pulled off to the side in a way where they're not being as singled out as they would as one at a time. And so we thought that that was really important to be able to protect that information for our students. But it's also a really good way for us just to look at temperature in general. We know that temperature is only one measure to determine if somebody is not well enough to be in school. And so even if it's somebody with a fever, it's really beneficial because we can determine who that is that has a fever from a very long distance, which is something that we really wanted to do. We're trying to make this environment as really as normal as we possibly can when students are returning. So we're very excited about that product. It works very well. And that will be in all of our schools in high traffic areas. And so I want to thank the board for that purchase. It's definitely a top of the line piece of equipment that, again, can be repurposed post-COVID. So I talked a little bit before about this is an area that we have begun discussions with our union about bringing back our high-risk, high-need students. It's not new. The public health order back in September, it was September 14th, the county allowed bringing small cohorts back. That's about the time where youth sports, and the philosophy of the county is to bring back small cohorts of students in a very controlled and safe environment. And so we did not jump on that right away, obviously, with it being the end of October, but it's been available for school districts for quite some time. And so while the county is allowing, and they feel it's safe, to bring back 25% of our special education cohort groups, 25% of the total enrollment, while they feel that is the number where we can't exceed, we also did not feel that that would be productive for us or safe for us. And so we made a decision based on our highest risk and our highest need students that we would take a different approach, and that we were reaching out to have discussions about bringing back students at each school in this area in a cohort group. And as you can see, the way that this chart is, we have the school site on the left-hand side. The total enrollment of those schools is in the second column. The county allows you to bring back 25%, per school by enrollment. So really, what we could do is, if we had this many students in our special education classes, that we could bring back 138 students at Hawthorne. We could bring back 153 students at Horace Mann. We could bring back 219 students at Beverly Vista Middle School and 312 students at the high school. And we just do not think that that is productive. That is not something that we are looking to do. But we are looking at our most vulnerable group. And so we feel like there is a group of students that need more than just screen time. And so this is not at all to diminish anything that is happening with distance learning, because amazing things are happening. But there are a number of services that these students need that they are not receiving at home, and certainly not in the way in which it can be delivered. And so what we're asking for is to bring back this small group of students. And so that would be 7 students at Hawthorne, not 138, but just over 1%, not 25%, just over 1%. At Horace Mann, there are 11 students, just under 2%. And as you can see, Beverly Vista Middle School and Beverly Hills High School are less than 1%. So 7 students at the middle school and 12 students at the high school. And so, like special education assessments, we've had some really creative, unique discussions about what that looks like for our assessments. And so we envision the same type of conversation for working with our students and our teachers about what that looks like. There has been some discussion about what outdoor spaces can you provide. We've had some discussions about we've proposed that it certainly does not need to be a full day of instruction. That may not be what is in the best interest of students and staff, but we are open to designing a program so that there is some instruction in person for these 36 students. And we're open to what that is and what time of the day that is, how often that is, much like the conversation we had very successfully with BHEA with assessments. And so we look forward to continuing those conversations. Safety is our highest priority. We are looking at a very, very small group of students as the county has allowed in a very controlled and safe environment. And so this is on the agenda for later, but I do want to just bring some data to the board's attention that this is a waiver. It went away before and it came back now. This is the waiver that has just had a revision. This revision is that no longer are they requiring the union support or the parent support as far as a letter is concerned. And so now they've changed the terminology and they're looking more that there has been a consultation that has taken place. And so as you can see here, it's TK through 2. And you can see that there is 245 students at Hawthorne that is in this group, and at Horace Mann, there are 234 as well. And I can tell you that we've had a lot of conversations about this particular waiver. And I can tell you that our recommendation is to not bring these students back right away. As I talked about with our special education small group cohort, those 36 students, we would like to preserve an environment that is not going to be complicated by having 200 additional students or more at each of these elementary schools. And so there's going to be a time for that. But right now we don't believe that that is in our best interest to have that many students start to come on campus. There is some discussion that we've had on the cabinet that when this is allowed, that we could perhaps get creative again with phasing in. It could be TK in our kinder students, for a couple of weeks, and then start phasing in our first grade, second grade. Fortunately, we have a lot of design opportunity when it comes to phasing back into our schools. Keep in mind, we will most likely be in a hybrid perspective as far as the 6-foot physical distancing does not look like that's going to go away anytime soon. So that would certainly limit the number of students that are in person. So it wouldn't be at any one time, the numbers that you see here. But as far as the waiver is concerned, there were very few school districts, as you can imagine, did not complete the waiver. There was a lot of private schools, charter schools that filled that out. It was very difficult to obtain some of the requirements. Now that the requirements have been revised, there are a number of students that are applying for this waiver. And so it would be my recommendation to apply for this waiver. That doesn't mean to say that this is something that I see us recommending, while we're in the position that we are now. As I mentioned with the calendar, this could be something that we might recommend at the first of the year. But I do think that it is important to apply for the waiver and to see if we're able to get the waiver. Again, this is an application process. It's not a notification. You do have to apply. And we are in a belief that we should fill this out, complete it. That gives the county the opportunity to come out physically on our sites and check us out. And then we have the opportunity to implement this phase in when we're ready to do so. I think that once an application is filled out, that it's going to take a couple of weeks anyway at this point before any approval process is provided. So I give that recommendation to the board, and I know that's on our agenda for a little bit later, but there's some data for you and a recommendation about when we believe would be the best time for that to take place. And then finally, I just want to end with that we've had a communication platform upgrade. And so many times this happens when you have something that you have in place, which is kind of a staple for us, which is Aries. And so in the past, we had SignalKit was the platform group that provided all of the communications. And it was, it came with Aries, and it was okay. It wasn't great. But, and I think that this is kind of indicative of, it was, what's nice about Aries is they're always looking at the competition, and they're looking to see what's out there and what's better. And they've been able to do that through acquiring Parent Square. So the good news is this is not going to be a huge changeover process for parents, teachers, staff, administrators. It's really not. They've made this pretty easy for the user. There's going to be lots of new features to go in and to look at and explore. But basically, you're going to be logging in the same way. You're going to be clicking on communication, and then you're going to be able to see where it's very easy to navigate. It's very user-friendly. And then you'll be able to also look at your settings and make some decisions there about how and when to receive this communication. So it's really not, nobody at this time needs to bring on a new initiative, I know, but this is certainly not something that is going to, take a lot of new thinking. It's very intuitive, and it's very easy to navigate as you go around. So that will be happening by the end of the week. And then finally, just, to celebrate some of the great things that have been happening with our construction and our maintenance and facilities. There's some shade structures that have been put up, and they are ready to go, and they're just beautiful at Beverly Vista Middle School and at Horace Mann. And so I just wanted to show you some pictures of some progress and some development in these areas. Sorely needed, especially now. This could not come at a better time as we are exploring as many creative and alternative ideas as possible for using our outdoor space. So I want to thank our construction team, maintenance, operations. This is our PTAs had some development and some input as well. It's been a long time in the making, and lots of discussions. I know in many of the years that I've been here, but it's come to fruition, and they're just beautiful, and they do exactly what we would hope that they would. And they're just made of a quality material, and it's really a game changer for us. And it's at the exact time where we need it. So wanted to share that with you as some good news, and to share that with you. So any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer or clarify anything that I've mentioned tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Breggy. We'll start with Mr. Margo. I'm sorry, with Mr. Kashanian.
I have no comments. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Breggy.
Thanks, Juni.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Breggy. I think you pretty much covered everything about everything. I'll talk about the waiver when it comes up on the agenda later. So
Okay.
I'll leave that for that. Thank you.
Difficult to hear. Mr. Spitz.
Well, the report's very comprehensive, and we'll be dealing with a portion of it down the line here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus.
Uh,
I'm sorry, Mrs. Walker.
I thank you for the report. It has a lot of content, and it's not always easy to get through. I do want to put a fine point just on the end piece. The shade structures were actually something, I know that you mentioned it, I just want to reiterate it because I think it's really important. The shade structures were part of the discussion about reconfiguration phase 2. So that has been in the works for a really long time. I don't want anyone to be confused that this was just something we were able to do quickly and slide through. This required a lot of work. It required consultation with DSA, and this was part of phase 2. It happens to coincide with needs for outdoor instruction. So that's a really good silver lining benefit. But I just want everyone to know that was in the works for a long time. And I'm really happy to see it completed. Thanks, guys.
Okay, Mrs. Marcus.
Well, I would think it was a rather very complete summation of what's going on in the last couple of weeks. I appreciate that the community is getting to hear all of this, those that are listening in. One quick question about the Aries changeover. I hope that, or it's a comment, I hope it doesn't create a lot of confusion, and I hope that it will be smooth so that the parents will be able to navigate it, as you said, very easily. I just hope that that will be the case. And again, a very complete report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus. And thank you, Dr. Breggy, for that report. I have no questions or comments. At this point, we're going to go on to our student board members report. Mr. Kashanian.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone has had a good start to their week. This is a very serious week for many seniors, including myself, because early action and early decision applications are due on November 1st. That means 6 more days. Next, there was a recent poll sent out to the senior class asking them if they are feeling relaxed or stressed. And out of the 40 respondents, we found out that 80% are stressed. The next question asked if students were busy with college applications, and we got the same response of about 80%, which shows that the application process does correlate with stress. In order to cope with the stress that many of us are feeling right now, I recommend taking breaks every now and then because this gives your mind a chance to rejuvenate and continue working efficiently. Personally, I've been taking 5-minute walks every 2 hours, and being surrounded by nature really helps me reduce my stress before getting back to my work. Next, many students are confused about what is going on with sports. Some of them know that sports are going to be happening in person, yet some of them do not. So I think it would be beneficial to send out an email to all students and parents, reminding them how we are dealing with sports and which teams are going to be practicing on campus and which ones will not. Lastly, I've been hearing from some students that teachers are making their tests longer than they usually are in person when we are at school in order to prevent cheating. This is frustrating many students who are actually studying and keeping their academic integrity because they're having to rush through the test worrying that they will not be able to finish. In addition, some teachers are sticking to this method and not experimenting with other methods of testing, which is harming students' grades, although they are prepared. I've heard suggestions from students of making tests shorter so that they are capable of being finished in the class time given. Also, I think that presentation and projects may be a better way of assessing students because in that case, they're on the spot and they will have to speak about the topics they have studied without being able to have the time to get around the system. Other than this, school has been going great and it's been getting more and more comfortable for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kashanian. Any questions or comments from Mr. Kashanian? Okay, haven't seen none. Thank you. We'll move on with our agenda. We're now going to go to business and finance, and we have an information item before us. We have the 2019-2020 unaudited actuals from LACO, and I believe Mr. Roach will be leading that discussion as well.
Yes, President Hackers, members of the board, when we do our unaudited actuals, our interim reports and our budget, we send that information over to Los Angeles County Office of Education. They review our reports, they call us, ask questions, and then they submit this letter, thumbs up or thumbs down to the board president. So just happy to report. They've reviewed our unaudited actuals from last year and we got a thumbs up and we're ready to go. And we currently actually are in the middle of our audit. The auditors are at the district as we speak, and we'll have some more information about the audit for the board a little bit later.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Okay, any questions? Mr. Spitz.
I just want to mention that this letter from LACO is the first one in recent years regarding our budget reports that does not require a plan for a financial turnaround. And so we should all feel very, very good and comfortable about that. Thank you.
So my thunder, Mr. Spitz, I was just going to point that out. It is nice to receive a letter like this for the first time in 5 years. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for leading that discussion. We're going to now move on to item 12B.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of resolution 2020-2021-018, emergency resolution for replacement of district-wide energy management system.
So moved. Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I did have a question. Wade, can I direct this at you, sir?
Most certainly.
Okay, so it costs, the estimated cost to replace is $800,000. And I just wanted to know, what did we put in our deferred maintenance fund over the next 3 years? Does that cover this expense over the 3-year period we budgeted it, or is this going to exceed that?
That's actually a really great question. We only put in the budget about $500,000 for HVAC. So we're going to have to go back into the deferred maintenance budget and make some adjustments. And we always expected that we would have to do that as some projects come in higher, some projects come in lower. But we'll need to do that for the board probably over the next 3 months, go through that plan and make some adjustments through the out years. So
Okay.
Substantially all the costs are in there already, but we will have to make some adjustments to some projects in the out years.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments before we vote? Mrs. Marcus. Mrs. Marcus, you're muted.
You have listed that as approximately an $800,000 expense. So do we have any idea of companies that do that? Have we done any research yet into what the needs will be, or is this just a general thing that's fallen by the wayside and we need to start researching that? Has there been any idea about companies that do this and so on?
Yes, I believe they did a lot of research actually before I even came to the district. I think maybe Don or Ken may be on the online right now and can jump in if they have additional information. But this essentially is the same system that we have planned to use for all the modernized buildings at the high school and El Rodeo. And it's the same system that we use at Horace Mann. So it'll bring all of our systems in line using the same energy management system that we currently use at Horace Mann. And please, Don or Ken, jump in if you have additional information.
One question, if we're in the process of building B1 to high school, was this not taken into consideration in terms of putting it into place when we were building the building? As far as, in other words, we're in the process of building the building, and yet we have to replace this now.
Yes, Trustee Marcus, it's a great question. So this system is for those buildings that aren't going to get modernized or be reconstructed. So it'd be like for the A building at Beverly Hills High School, or for Beverly Vista, and for Hawthorne. So it's for those facilities that aren't being modernized or reconstructed at this point, so that all of our buildings will have the same energy management system.
So it's presently being employed at El Rodeo and the buildings at the high school that are brand new.
Yes, ma'am. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions or comments from the board? Okay, we'll call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. That passes 5-0. We are going to move on to planning facilities.
I will move approval, ratification of a lease agreement with William Scotsman to provide one break room modular building for the facilities and maintenance and operations department's workspace at Beverly Hills High School.
Do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions?
This
I
is
have a
being
correction.
reimbursed by MTA, as I recall, right?
That's correct. I do have a correction. The amount in the recommended motion notes 12 months for a cost of 25,000. The proposal that's an error. The proposal that was submitted with this is actually for 24 months. So we'll need to correct from 12 months to 24 months.
And what about the amount, Mr. Blake?
The amount is correct.
Okay, so we'll note that in the minutes. And you're going to bring it back anyways are you not?
Well, if we can make the correction in the minutes,
Yeah.
then it matches the actual proposal. It's an error on this, on the recommended motion.
Okay, so what I would suggest is bring it back. I mean, not bring it back. We'll vote for it, but then we'll note it in the minutes, and then, you know, if the facilities, subcommittee can make sure that this gets taken care of. You guys discuss it, and then if you're good,
Well,
you should report
I
back to
can,
the board.
once again, let me note that the actual attached document is correct. It does say 24 months in the attachment that we're voting on. He just
Should
wanted
we
to
record
make,
in the minutes?
yeah, that
I'll
the
put it in the
transmittal-
minutes.
Yep.
And I'll change the motion online so it'll all match up.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda.
Okay, I'll make a motion for the ratification of an addendum to lease agreement number 1319458 with William Scotsman for the relocation of the bathroom modular building at the high school for the facilities maintenance and operations workspace.
I'll second.
Any questions, comments? Everything here matches up, Mr. Blake?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, thank you. Next item, I'll make a motion to ratify of a trailer modification agreement with William Scotsman to modify one modular building at Rodeo School for the relocation of the facilities and maintenance and operations department workspace. May I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Walker-Schuman. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
I'll move
Moving.
approval of amendment number 32 to the agreement with DLR Group for the modernization of Beverly Hills High School.
I second it.
Okay, questions on this one? Any questions, comments? I did have a question on this one. It is a significant amount of money that we've been, the reimbursement, no, I'm sorry, this would increase architectural fees for this project to $1.7 million and change. And I was just wondering, since it's so cited in here in the narrative and the transmittal that this is a reimbursement from Metro, I was wondering if we, you know, are we certain that they're going to be reimbursing this 100%?
Yes, Ms. Hacker. In the court pleadings in December, when the issue came up for redesign costs, MTA on record in court agreed to pay for the cost for the redesign for Building C.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those.
My only concern is that I hope they adhere to what was in the court and that what they said. I just hope that they stand by it, because I don't know that it's in writing anywhere yet. It's in a court order, but that's only, they said that they would take care of it. But I hope they don't go back on their word.
It's part of the agreements that are in court for the eminent domain and the right of entry. It was predicate to the agreement for all of the reimbursement program, but specifically this specific cost is noted in court by the court that this particular cost would be the responsibility of MTA.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Mr. Blake.
I will move approval of first reading of Board Policy 3100, budget.
I'll second. Okay, so this came to us as a request from the Finance Committee and staff, and they're recommending that the Board of Education consider revising Board Policy 3100 for a budget and update on the reserve target from 20% to 25%. And we have with us, I saw on the screen, Mrs. Nair. Hi, Mrs. Nair, how are you? Thank you for being with us tonight. So I'll turn it over to, I'm not sure who's leading the discussion, Mr. Roach or Mrs. Nair. Please weigh in.
President Hacker, members of the board, I'll get us started, and the chairperson of the Finance Committee can jump in. So we had a lot of conversations during the spring and summer about cash flow of the district and the need historically for the district to actually borrow funds either through a trans, which is a tax revenue anticipation note, or from the County Office of Education. And folks wonder why we need to do that. It's because our property taxes, remember we're a basic aid district, we don't get periodic state funding like most districts. We get money from property taxes in December and then in April. So we have a cash shortfall historically during the months of October and November because we're waiting on property taxes to come in. So as we discussed this in the Finance Committee, we talked about if our reserve was a little higher as a basic aid district, would we still have to borrow through a trans or borrow from the County Office of Education? And doing some research, we determined that a small increase in the reserve from 20 to 25% would allow us not to have to pay to borrow through a trans or pay interest to borrow from the county. So after several discussions, the Finance Committee wanted to recommend to the board that we make a small increase in the reserve from 20 to 25% so that we avoid the cost of having to borrow in November every year because of the late receipt of property taxes. So if the chairperson wants to jump in to add any comments, I'd appreciate that. Oh.
You muted.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Roach. I think you explained it very well. And I would tell you that we voted unanimously in favor of the increase. We also discussed that if it was a hardship to do it all 5%, that maybe it could be a staged 2.5%, 1%, something over a couple or 3 years. But we felt that it would smooth things out a great deal as far as the budget and make save the school district a lot of money. So that was the opinion that we are supporting and making a recommendation.
Thank you, Mrs. Nair, and thank you, Mr. Roach, for that. And we will go around and take questions at this point. I see that Mr. Margot and Mr. Spitz have their hands up, so we will start with Mr. Margot.
Thank you. Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Colleen. What calculated roughly at our budget is right now, what is the estimated 5% equate to?
It's about another $4 million or so.
Okay. And do we earn any interest anywhere in Fund 17? Do any of those funds earn interest currently?
Yes, they earn interest to the county pool.
Okay, so if we were to remove those funds to fill up a cash shortfall, would the loss of interest be significant at all to any degree? I know we're looking at saving money, but is it offset by that loss of interest?
Yes, the interest in the pool is fairly low, as you all are aware. The savings actually is the transactional cost from doing a tran, which can be substantial. So there is a little bit of savings, but it really is the transactional cost and the time and effort the staff has to go into either to do a tran or actually even to do a borrowing from the county office.
So is the amount of the transactional cost far above the amount of potentially lost interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you don't have those specific numbers. It's all based on how much would be borrowed?
Yes, it's based on how much would be borrowed and how long the borrowing period is.
Oh, okay, so the transactional cost fluctuates, so there's no set cost to that.
No, it can
Okay.
fluctuate.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Mr. Spitz.
Yes. I just want to point out that School Services of California, which is an advisory service that we frequently use, and every other advisory service in the state recommend that unencumbered reserves of at least 25% of the annual budget. They recommend that as a minimum reserve for basic aid districts. So I think the key issue here is not primarily how much interest savings there are, because it's not a hard job. The really important thing is for prudent reserves in the event of shortfall in revenues that could occur. I don't advocate impacting the educational program to achieve this benchmark, but all other actions would be appropriate, and it may take some time, probably a few years at least, unless the district is the recipient of significant unexpected revenue. But this is a very prudent objective for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Mrs. Walker.
I'm so thrilled to hear this, and I have to thank you, Mrs. Nair and Mr. Roach. 2 years ago, we talked a lot about the input of the Finance Committee and how integral it is to making sure that our decisions are sound. So I have to thank you for your professionalism, for your consideration, for your guidance. I think this is exactly what we need in order to make sure that our decision making is optimized. I appreciate it. I think it's a worthy goal, even if it takes a couple of years to achieve. And, you know, with most things financial, the more independent we can be, the less we have to rely on loans. I think the better off we are. So I'm thrilled to have this recommendation and to support it.
Thank you. Mrs. Marcus.
Well, Noah, you asked the same questions that I was going to ask just a minute ago. How much money are we talking about, and so on. I was just curious. I think right now our reserves are at, is it 21 or 21 something million? Is that what we're at right now? Wade?
Our reserves are about 21%. So
21% I meant, yeah.
15 million, right?
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, Wade, I just want to make sure, because it's 15 million. Is that what you said?
15 million, approximately 21% right now. I think I heard that. That was what I was trying to remember. 21 was the number I was thinking about. And I agree with Mr. Spitz on one thing, and that is that I don't want to see this attempt to increase the reserves affect the educational program, but that I do like the idea of slowly reaching up to that 25% as best as we can without affecting it. So I just want to point that out. And I want to thank the Finance Committee for that very thorough way to help our district. And I'm going to miss you, Colleen, but I'll see you at the open air march.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the comments made by Mr. Spitz. I know that all along the recommendation for basic aid districts has been that you hold, you know, at least, what is it, 24 to 25% of reserve. And so we've always been a little under that. So it's really nice to see that we're going forward with achieving the mark that has been so long been advised for basic aid districts to follow. So I think this is a good practice, and I'm very, very excited to support it. Thank you, Mrs. Nair, for all your years of service as a member of the Finance Committee, and to all the members of the Finance Committee. And again, to Mr. Spitz and Mrs. Walker-Schuman for representing the board on that committee. Okay, so we're going to call for the question.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, Mr. Margot.
Thank you. Just real quickly. This is where institutional knowledge comes in. Back in 2013, when the board then decided to create this reserve fund, this Fund 17, and start socking this money away, it was our intent to use this money to bridge those times where we were in a cash shortfall. So I would ask this to you, Wade. What are the reasons that at, let's say, 20%, we can't do that and we need 25% to do that?
When the shortfall is to such a degree that 20% is not quite enough
to
cover the shortfall. So if we got to 25%, based on current receipt of property taxes, we could cover the shortfall.
Okay, so it was just the 20% didn't do it for us.
Correct.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe that has to do with 3-year projections, right, as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Colleen, for being with us. Okay, so we're going to move on to professional and official business.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised resolution 2020-2021-016, supporting anti-bias in the district.
I will second.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I just thank everybody that worked on this and brought it back and hopefully keyed it up so we can approve it. Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you.
You're muted.
We're on to
Yes,
CBOC interview process.
CBOC, I'm talking to myself. Yes, the CBOC interview process. This came up at the last board meeting, if you recall, and it had been recommended by council that we do figure out a way to solidify a process that can be followed. The process can always be changed if the board decides to in the future. But we, again, just to reiterate, Dr. Breggy had come up with this, I think, a very practical process that was used. And it's the same process that is used by our commissions here in the city of Beverly Hills. Again, I think it expedites the process, and it still allows for the other board members. The process, let me just explain what was that there's liaisons that are appointed by the school board to represent us in different capacities through our advisory committees. So as I just mentioned in our prior agenda item, we have the finance committee, for example. We have 2 board members, of course, that are our liaisons, and we also have 2 board members appointed to the CBOC. And so the idea here for the CBOC interview process would be such that the 2 board members, along with the superintendent, the chair and the vice chair of that committee, would interview applicants and take that list back to the board, and then bring that list, if approved, back for a vote in open. If other board members wanted to have, if there was a problem, if they didn't want the process, or they wanted the process to include a second tier of interviews, I guess that I don't know if that was part of the process, but that's something that definitely could happen if there was a need to do that. Dr. Breggy, did you want to jump in? I know you used this process in the past with other districts that you were were superintendent.
I have. Of course, there's different processes, different places. So this is something that I thought was done in the past here. And so that's why when it came up in conversation, the collaboration between the board leadership and the CBOC leadership seemed to be a natural process. So, I mean, it worked well for us. I feel like we have some really good candidates. something that I've done in the past. And so, I was glad to at least share what I've done that's worked well.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to add is that the CBOC, they do a lot of work throughout the year with these reports, the audit report and the performance report and the audit report, and they have to carry that weight of heavy lifting to provide these reports for the board. So I think they are best they have better knowledge as to what areas they're looking to bring, what kind of talent they're trying to bring to that group, whether it be a business, financial, or construction management background, which they know best what they're looking for and what their shortfalls are. So from that perspective, I really do appreciate their, I thought it was really interesting to see them play a significant role in the process. But ultimately it gets approved by the board. So at this point, we can kind of go around and the board can entertain, we can entertain your ideas or thoughts, and hopefully give some structure to how we would be supporting, if the board should decide, a process to select CBOC members in the future. And if this is the process, this should be adopted. Mr. Margot.
Thank you. We've used, in the past, we had an interview process where the applicants would come in front of the board as a whole, as an entity, and get vetted out by the board in that situation. That seemed to have built quality people on the CBOC, and I think this round that was just done has also brought us some quality people. So as to say what would be the best approach, I guess we would have to wait a few months and see if the new approach to vetting out these candidates yielded success. That's if we're data driven, that's what we would look at. It's something that I think, because it is a required committee, the Citizens of Bond Oversight Committee is required by the state. I think that the board needs to have a little more of a say in that process, and I don't know if it falls under a liaison situation. Part of the reason I say that is because it's not something that meets regularly. A lot of our liaisons meet on a regular basis with whatever committees they're working with, whether it's the city commissions or city council liaisons or facilities or finance committee, whatever it is, we meet on a regular basis. So to have the entire board have to come in maybe once a year, maybe not even that, to fulfill seats on the Citizens Oversight Committee, I don't think that's an inconvenience. I don't think it falls under anything outside of the board's realm. So I would in the future, I would prefer the process to have all the board members have the chance to vet out the CBOC members together.
So I just want to say that the process was, we did pass this by council, and they said that it's commonly used with other districts, so it's not something unusual. I'm not sure. I do recall how it was done in the past. I'm not sure that we have asked council if that's the right way to do it, because we'd have to ask if interviews could be done privately. I didn't ask that question, but we could certainly entertain that question for council. Mr. Spitz.
When I first learned about the process that was employed, I felt very, very comfortable about it, and I still do. If you have the applicants reviewed by the board leadership and the COC leadership, I think that's very, very sufficient. And it even, I think, makes it less likely that that any appointments that are made to the COC are, say, political appointments, where one board member, for example, owes something to a supporter or whatever. I think that this was a very, very professional way of handling it. I feel very, very good about it. I hope we continue to do it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Mrs. Walker.
This was the first time that I've gone through this, but as far as I've heard from all the other applicants that had been interviewed and from other board members who were part of other, interview processes for CBOC, I understand that this one was rather different than it had been done in the past. And I think the reason that I brought it up last time, and I'm glad we're having the conversation now, is that the way it came about was not with the full opinion of the board. It was just changed. And I recognize that Dr. Breggy wasn't here for the previous interview process, so he didn't know that in the past, all of the board members had sat in on the interviews. And I fully appreciate that. But I like Mr. Margot said, this is happening once a year, if that. This hasn't happened in 4 years, so I don't feel like it's overly burdensome for the entire board to be part of the interview process and be able to ask questions, particularly because of the duration of the terms for CBOC. And while we want to be good partners and obviously value the input of the leadership of CBOC, I think it's important for all of the board members to be able to listen to what the interviewees have to say. So I would be in favor of continuing the way that we've done it historically, particularly in light of the fact that this is not something that we have to do very often.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus.
Well, this is the first time that I have gone through that process. I remember we did this with the 7-11. I don't think we did that. I think that was done by the another committee. But I was not uncomfortable with the process at all. I did not feel that that it was an unusual one. But as I say, I was not here in the previous time. I do recall when we were choosing somebody, and I think Mr. Spitz, it was my first time on the board for the first year, we were picking somebody for the finance committee, and you had someone to recommend and I had someone to recommend, and it was quickly decided by all the members of the board based on our recommendations. I remember that, so that the whole board did get a chance to weigh in on the names that you and I brought. So I'm not sure, as I say, I was comfortable with the way that it was done. If the board wants to change it, then we have to decide. The only thing that I'm saying is if we change it, we have to follow the process and do it that way all the time. So however they want to do, I'm not one way or the other, it doesn't matter to me that much, but I do feel that if we are going to change it, we adhere to the policy and make it work the same way all the time.
I would like to add, if I may, just quickly, President Hacker, that we do have an election and there will be new board members seated, and we might want to just defer this for them because we're not going to have another round of CBOC interviews until after the new board is seated. So perhaps it would be something best suited for that board to decide upon moving forward.
I agree with that.
Well,
I only brought it back up. I brought it back because we had the discussion last week and it wasn't on the agenda to discuss the process. And Mrs. Walker-Schuman made the suggestion that, you know, well, the lawyers did say, hey, you guys should really figure out how you want to do this. I did want to say there was some discrepancies with the way past practice had been done, Mr. Margot, and I did look into that after you questioned it, or Mrs. Walker-Schuman did. And so there is some discrepancies. So the format that you're all talking about would have to include some changes. If that's something, you can't have a closed session discussion about yes or no on the candidates. You could do a similar situation where we did the 7-11 committee where we rated applications, but we didn't have an interview process for that. So just wanted to make that known to you all. So some of this closed session practice would not hold. So I do understand what you're saying. And as I said, when I started the discussion, I said, if this was something that we agreed to, it could definitely always be changed with a board coming on in the near future. So I think this process was great, to be honest with you. I thought it was really, as I said, it was, you know, they know exactly where their deficits are as far as people and what they need when they put these reports together. So we're not there to do that work. They are. So it was interesting for me to hear that piece of the opinion of the group. And you know, as I said, the city has a long-standing reputation for handling their commissions very well and for this election process. And I think this mirrors that process. And so I think it's a very practical and strong process. So I'd be in favor of seeing the school board adopt this process going forward. Should they change it or want to change it, that's up to them. But I leave it to you all to decide how you want to handle this. We can put this to rest if you'd like, or we can carry on with further discussion in adopting this process or not. So I think I heard Mr. Margo and Mrs. Walker-Schuman, they're not interested. I heard Mrs. Marcus could go either way. So Ms. Marcus, I'm going to ask you to decide how you feel about this and let us know, and then we'll go back to Mr. Spitz and then we'll make a decision.
You're muted, Mrs. Marcus.
I was very comfortable with the process and I would be willing to continue with it. Only, as I said, if that's what we're going to decide, then that's the policy that has to be used. So I'm comfortable with it. I thought it went very well. It worked well, and I would be willing to continue with it. But again, it has to be used the same way in all future deliberations.
Unless the next board decides that they want to change it, since we've got potentially 3 different board members coming on in a month and a half. So I think it's very easy to say that you're comfortable with the process when you got to be part of it. I'll just point that out. It's very difficult for someone being on the outside, not knowing any of the background of any of the applicants before the recommendation was made, which is why I think it's important for all of us as board members to hear the qualifications of all of the candidates that are applying.
And as I said,
I do not feel that I would have felt any differently, Tristan. I felt that if I hadn't been on the committee, I don't think I would have accepted the committee's. I feel that comfortable that they would have made the right decision.
Okay, Mr. Spitz.
Well, as I say, and looking back on it, I think that the process that was followed is preferable to the prior process, where just the board made the determinations, but having the leadership of the COC, as well as the leadership of the board, handle this makes all the sense in the world to me. So I like this process better than the former one.
So what I would suggest is I would agree with that. I would say that the process now would be this, and we should put that into the bylaws. And if a new board comes along, this should be a topic of discussion should you choose to, and then you can decide to continue to have it or not to have it. But I think that I doubt that people are going to run and want to change this, or they really have an issue with it. I think it was a very fair process. I think
So
it's actually.
Sorry, were you finished?
No, I wasn't. So what I was saying is, I think that based on the conversation we're giving, this is just a discussion item, but you know, Jabari did say you all should really decide how, you know, incorporate this as part of your policy, your bylaws for adopting members into your CBOC. So that's what we're having the discussion about tonight. I think there's three board members in favor of continuing with the process that was just recently used to bring the new 4 board CBOC members. And I think we're going to make the recommendation based on the discussion tonight to include that process, that process be adopted for the future.
So does that also include the finance committee? We just talked about the CBOC.
Yes, we're just talking about the CBOC. The finance committee, I think, works a little different. And we can talk about that if you guys want, but but I did want to clarify that I remember being texted and said, and you know, when the last committee member was added for the finance committee and saying, hey, you know, we think this, I don't remember what you, I remember voting on it in public, but I never got to a point per se, a person into the finance committee. And I was happy to go with the recommendation that I believe came from the finance committee members. Okay, so Mrs. Walker-Schuman, you had a comment?
Yes. What my question is, what exactly is the process then? You're saying it's a liaison that's chosen, but when is it chosen and who chooses it? Is it just the president and vice president become the liaison, or do we decide in the installation who it is that's going to be?
Usually in the past, the way it had always, I mean, I remember, no, I believe that what happened was it's whoever during the installation, I don't know, Mr. Margaret, were you always the president, the vice president when you were there? I don't think so. I think
No,
you were just a member.
Because we never had liaisons to this process, there was nobody chosen yet.
Well, I remember that I specifically asked when Mrs. Marcus came on, we wanted to be on the CBOC and you came off it. Because I had never been in my prior 3 years. You had been going, you and another board member, I can't remember which one.
I never went to the CBOC. I'm not a fan of that. I believe they should operate autonomously.
They do operate autonomously.
Right, I know, but they report to us, and I don't think we should be in part of their meetings. But that's an issue for another discussion. We never had a process where we had decided who were the liaisons officially to the CBOC. Certain board members attended the CBOC meetings. We never had more than one attend, or two, excuse me, at any given time, obviously.
Not more than two, but I do remember this being part of the installation 2 years ago. It was part of the discussion in public.
We could go back in the records. I don't remember CBOC liaisons. I remember everything else. So
I agree. I don't remember CBOC liaisons, and it definitely didn't happen when we changed the structure back in December last year.
Mr. Margot, respectfully, but when I was on the CBOC, you were there. You did attend the meetings and you were on the minutes. So you did attend.
I was invited, so I attended.
I would say that Mrs. Marcus and I attend, and we don't take a vote. We actually don't, we just go and listen. And Dr. Breg is there, and just, it's just I mean, just kind of like, I don't see any different.
I don't have an issue with that. We're talking about the interview process. That's what we're trying to decide.
Well, the question was asked about the liaisons, so this is why we're entertaining that discussion.
Right, the liaisons for the interview process. That was Tristan's question. How do you choose the liaisons to serve?
Well, I would assume if we follow practice based on the installation, when all of those appointments are made to the Human Relations Commission, to Don Blake's group, there's an ad hoc committee for that. This would be treated no differently, and 2 members should be assigned. If they go, I don't go all the time. When I try to go most of the time, but if I don't go, Mrs. Marcus goes, and vice versa. So I would assume that the process would be such that the 2 individuals that are assigned to attend the CBOC would be the 2, if you want to call them liaisons or members or representatives, we can decide what you want to call these people. These would be the individuals responsible for being part of that process. And every year, when every 2 years, you can, call the question and find out, if there's a change in membership. And I think that's what we did this time around.
I'm going to suggest that in the event that we have 2 people that volunteer or are appointed as liaisons at an installation or a changing of roles, then those 2 people become the liaisons if there is an interview process for additional CBOC members. But I'm also going to recommend that if we do not have that we convene as a whole board for the interview process, because I absolutely know that it wasn't selected a year ago, that there were not specific people appointed to CBOC in the discussion that we had when you became president, Mrs. Hacker. So
we haven't appointed CBOC
in 2018 either. But what I'm going to say is if that is not done at installation, then we should have the ability to come together as a board and do those interviews together.
It would make perfect sense that the 2 liaisons who actually sit on the CBOC then, who understand the current making of the CBOC, and where they are would be the best people for that job then, which, by the way, I just want to state for the record, I still think this should be a decision deferred to the new board. I'm not for or
And
against
no one
this
is
right
saying
now. I just think we should put this off and let the new board decide. That's all.
I agree.
It's been duly noted. I
you.
think that we still have 3 board members that feel that this is a good process. And again, if you want to change the process, Mr. Margot, if you're elected again, you know, you can always bring that up and change it. Sounds like you want to change it, and you can have a board majority then.
It's not that I want to change it. I just want to give the new board the opportunity to make that decision, because we are not interviewing for the CBOC. The 5 of us are not going to be involved in that anymore. So it will be different people. That's the only reason why I state that.
Duly noted, Mr. Margot. Okay, so do you want to, it sounds like we like the process. Let me just ask you one more time. I understand where you, Mr. Margot, and Mrs. Walker-Schuman are. And I think we're in agreement with what Mrs. Walker-Schuman just proposed. I think it's no different than the 2 liaisons. But are you saying that you don't want the COC chair and vice chair involved, Mr. Margot, in the process?
No, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, because you didn't talk about them.
Involved.
Okay.
No, and I would bring, if I think that's actually a good suggestion. So if we continued on with all the board members and we're able to avoid any issues from council, make sure we weren't violating anything, yeah, sure, I'd bring them aboard. But once again, I stay the course with saying this should be a decision deferred, but I was duly noted, so thanks.
Okay, any further comments, Mr. Spitz or Mrs. Marcus? So it sounds like this will be the process, and if you all want to change it in the future, you can. It can be something entertained, but just in the event that there's, although I don't foresee it, that there's a vacancy between now and December, this will be the process. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yes,
about
Ms.
that?
Marcus.
The CBOC has, I don't know how many people on it, and when they went to nominate them, there was no set number. I mean, there was, so that it wasn't like you pick the top 2. I mean, it was much, they could have any number of members. So it was not something that was limiting in that respect. So you know, the next one that comes up, if 3 or 4 CBOC members decide they don't want to do it anymore, they'll have to have more. Maybe they'll only have to have 2. I think you have to wait and see what the situation might be at that time. But the process that I saw that I was just on, regardless, if I hadn't been on that committee and you brought back those people to me, I would just have gone along with them, because I would have felt that the committee, that the process was working. So that's my only comment. But I don't know how long I don't remember last year voting on new CBOC.
No, we haven't.
I don't think we did it a year ago.
we did, though. We did have, but it was part of the process is defined by category. Like if somebody's in a specific category, like having a senior citizen, having somebody part of the tax-paying organization. And I do believe that we did that. And I believe that.
Oh, that was for the taxpayer. Yeah, they were short for a few, I think a year or so, or close to a year. They didn't have a taxpayer member representative. And so they needed to fill that because that is a mandate.
But they couldn't find anybody. I remember.
I think they did at the end, and they just put them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was like that needed to be done, and they were struggling with that mandate. Yeah, I do remember that, but there was no process for it. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
I don't remember. Did we vote for that? Did
we'd
they
like
come
to
back
say,
to the board?
yeah, I think it was Les Bronte, which, we should say, we value his input in very much in case he's watching. But yeah, so I think it was Les Bronte that actually joined us maybe a year ago. It was a spot that was open with a category that we needed to fill.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years. He's been there for a while now. Okay, so Dr. Breggy will talk to Jabari and see how this piece gets added for now. It's better to have something than nothing is the point. And you can always change it if you should choose to. Okay, moving on. Department of Health, the public health waiver, item 15C on the agenda. Dr. Breggy?
Yeah, so I provided some information to you, some of the data from my presentation. Also, wanted to share that again, they have revised a lot of the requirements. So we're going from a situation where we had very few schools. It was mostly private schools and some charter schools that were applying for the elementary waiver. And now that's changed. And so I think that there's going to be, based on conversations with my colleagues, most school districts are going to apply for this waiver just because they're not sure, how long it will take to process this waiver, and to have that in case, when numbers go are in a comfortable place and we want to start matriculating grade levels back in at an early age, our youngest learners, that makes sense to be able to do that. And then, just to have that assurance. It gives us some flexibility. Again, it doesn't mean it has to happen right away. It probably, would not be awarded to us for quite some time. I can't imagine with so many people now applying that they're still using factors of low income as well. So it's not something that I anticipate we would get right away. So really, I'm looking for, technically it's not a voting item. The superintendent does not necessarily need formal approval, but some direction and some feedback from the board is always important as we look at reopening our schools in phases.
Thank you, Dr. Breggy. We will start with Mr. Margo.
Thank you. Basically, what you said earlier in your superintendent report covered at least my feelings on this. I think it's important to be prepared. So if at any point not having that waiver trips us up, we're going to regret not applying for it. So I think we should apply for it. And also at the same time, right now, how things are going, I don't particularly would advocate putting kids immediately back in school either. It's cases are spiking not only all around the country, but in our own community and our city. Putting kids, taking them out of their homes and putting them together in any form is not going to help that. So my fear is that even if we were granted the waiver in a month and we thought about bringing kids back in cohorts, yes, it would disrupt their education, like you said earlier, especially in December. But it would also, if things continue to spike, even though we were granted the waiver, the county can easily pull the waivers and shut down the schools again. And that would be a very, very bad move. So we have to walk gingerly with this, but applying for the waiver, and then if by chance getting the waiver only starts the discussion about if we want to actually execute on that waiver. So I think we should move forward with it. And President Hacker, I'm going to step away for one moment if you don't mind. Thank you very much.
Sure. Will you be back? So you're giving direction to move forward with the waiver?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
I'll be right back. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Spitz.
I support the superintendent's recommendation to go for the waiver immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Mrs. Walker-Schmidt.
I agree. I just want to add a couple caveats. I want to recognize the fact that our numbers were going down. They are no longer going down. I want to recognize the fact that we saw a spike this week. As Dr. Brady said, we're now at 8.0. Last week, we're at 7.6. And I also want to mention that, a number of people have said, well, we shouldn't be going by LA County. Beverly Hills is different. We should be looking at our own cases. As of October 15th, our case rate was 10.2, so significantly higher even than the average LA County at this point. I agree we should move forward. I think we should walk very carefully. I agree with what Dr. Briggy said in that the likelihood of being approved before 3 or 4 weeks is highly unlikely given the parameters, that they're only approving 30 schools per week and that they're prioritizing the low income schools. So I don't think this should get anybody's hopes up, but I think it is our responsibility to at least go down that path and see what the possibilities are ahead. And this, I think, ties a little bit in with this special populations decision as well. We have to figure out a way forward. We have to do it very carefully. Yes, the numbers are spiking. It's entirely likely that LA County Public Health is going to be changing their guidelines and their orders, given what we're seeing. But within the parameters and the guidelines that they've set up, I think we need to take baby steps in that direction. So that's it.
Thank you.
Mrs. Marquez.
Well, I would agree wholeheartedly with what everybody has said. There's no question about it in my mind that first of all, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, so to speak. It's wise to have it in our hands, whether we use it or not. That's another subject. And the waiver is not going to expire. So we will always have it when and if we want to really start to talk about using it. Obviously, we're not going to start talking about it right now. The numbers are going up, but it doesn't hurt to know that we have our waiver, and when and if we can start to discuss it with safety and everything else, that we can proceed. So yes, Neko, Dr. Briggy, you have my official endorsement to go for the waiver.
Thank you.
Dr. Berge, I will definitely support your recommendation and support the comments that have been made by the colleagues on board, my colleagues on the board. I will say that this is just a baby step in having a way to make progress should those doors open up for the county, for our district, and that we would be ready to take advantage of that in the most methodical, planned and organized and careful way should we seek to proceed. So I think parents need to understand that this is all very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to all of this. And we understand the desires of the community and the needs, but we need to just, we're just taking baby steps. And hopefully, and we're all hopeful that we will be able to make progress. So with that being said, Dr. Brady, I think you have direction unanimously from the board to proceed to try to solidify that permit.
Thank you.
The waiver.
Can I add one more comment real quick?
On the issue?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I just want to recognize, and we've had a lot of communication from teachers and IAs with their concerns tonight. I just want to recognize that there's directing to move forward on this does not in any way judge the comments that we've received. I just want to speak for myself. I fully respect the positions of the teachers and the IAs. I completely understand not wanting to go back if they have risk factors or people in their homes that are compromised. And so I want to recognize that. And I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking that their health and safety is not important. And everyone, I think at this point, there's nothing we're going to do that's going to make everyone happy. We have to try to proceed very carefully, but I think everyone has to judge for themselves what their risk factor and assess for themselves what's right for them. And I completely respect whatever decision it is that each individual is going to make on their own. So I just want to put that out there too. I don't want that to go unrecognized.
I think the entire board feels that way. Thank you for those comments. Okay, so we're going to move on to in-person board meetings.
So this is just a thought, just to, since we don't get time to discuss as a group very often, the thought about going back to in-person board meetings in the John Cherney. We work so closely with KBEV, and we are so thankful and grateful for every bit of what they do for us every day. I have spoken to Mr. Carey as well, and he's welcome to jump in as well, to have if the board is up for going to an in-person board meeting at the John Cherney. We are not allowed to have visitors, so we would not have visitors in the audience, but we would have provisions and safety in place as we do in our classrooms and in all of our schools, where we would be comfortably spaced apart with, we have the plexiglass already ordered and ready to be put into place. And so that long dais would belong to the entire board. We have it mapped out already that if this is a direction the board wanted to go, that we would have cabinet sit in the audience in the John Cherney, and we would be 6 feet apart. And when cabinet was presenting, that we would step up to the podium, which is more than 6 feet apart from any board member, but we would have the 5 of you just spread across that entire dais with much more than your 6 foot physical distancing. So just a thought, if that was something that you would like to continue at some point, we're going to be there, but wanted to get your thoughts on that right now, or any ideas, suggestions, or perhaps a time to come back to you with this suggestion.
Okay, we will start with Mr. Margot's back. I was looking for him in the other box.
Hey, thank you. I'm back. Dr. Breggy, my first concern is, I guess I would ask about the students involved. So we would have not only our own Mr. Kashanian, who still is a student, we would also have the KBEV students. So how would the county address that? Would that be something that we would be allowed? Would we have to get a waiver for that? You know, there's one thing holding a meeting, there's another thing having students at the meeting. So.
Or did you have another process? Did you have something else in mind, an alternative way of doing this with the students in mind, Dr. Breggy?
So, I mean, there is a, students are an integral part of what we do there. So, and there are, they kind of work for us in this role. So it's an essential meeting. So it would be, it's not like it's a separate event. It's not as if this is, something that's non-essential that would be meeting on campus. So it would fit all of the requirements. And so with the students that are involved, of course, we would get parent permission. And I've talked to Mr. Carey about, how can we ensure that those students are also, 6 feet apart, masks, all of the PPE that's required.
Okay, so, and my second question would be about if we put ourselves back on campus, are we going to open any particular floodgates with parents saying, well, they're back, so let the kids go back, or the KBEV kids are back, so let all the kids back? I think there has to be really strict guidelines about doing something like this. And I also was going to say, are any other districts doing this now, meeting in person?
So I do know that there are some districts that are meeting in person. We are so fortunate and unique to have KBEV that is such an integral part in our meetings. That is not something that happens very often. So that's a little bit different to what we've done before. But at some point, we're going to be, it's almost difficult to think that we've been doing this for so long, since March, but at some point we're going to be having to make this decision, and at some point we're going to be coming back, whether it's a little bit later or whether it's earlier, and it's just preference at this point. I mean, I think our meetings are running as smooth as possible, and it's just something that I'm just anticipating that the day is going to come soon that we are going to be in person again. So just wanted to just throw that out just to get your thoughts.
Well, I guess you've answered my question, so I appreciate that. I guess my opinion is that our returning should kind of coincide with the students. I think we shouldn't ask anybody to do anything we wouldn't do, but none of us are there yet. So that's kind of where I'm falling now. Thanks.
Sure.
Mr. Spitz.
Well, I think that I'm certainly willing to get together under the safe conditions that Dr. Breggy has described at any time. I might suggest that we start getting together in person at such time that we require the teachers, any teachers, to come aboard. It might be a proper time to have the board get involved in this manner.
Okay, Ms. Walker-Schuman.
I agree. I think when we have students and teachers back on campus, we also should be back in person for meetings. That's just like super simple for me.
Okay, and Mrs. Marcus?
Well, it's a difficult question for me. I would love to be back that face to face and under the very same conditions like Mel speaks of. As you know, if the students are back, I think we should go back just as a show of, you know, that we're there. I do have a very serious problem, as you all know, and if I have to go back, I go back. But you know, I'm trying to hold off as long as possible, simply because of my condition, my situation as well. It's not have nothing to do with anything else. It's just a personal thing, and I think I hope you understand that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Marcus. So if it's safe and if it's permitted for us to go back, I would be open to that. But I obviously understand, like Mrs. Marcus, you know, I understand your comments, Mrs. Marcus, and you know, it doesn't, I would definitely be very supportive if again, if it was safe and permitted for us to go back, for us to conduct our meetings in public, I'd be open to that. Absolutely.
And if I could just make a suggestion, just getting this input, which is super helpful, is just to you know, begin. I'm a visual person, just to start to kind of just map this out and share with the board, so that everybody is aware of you know, how it would look operationally. And I'll meet with Mr. Carey to determine who is essential for you know, being part of the meetings and where they would be, just so that we can get kind of a picture of what it looks like to share with you. So you know, based on the information I just heard, I feel like there's enough interest to at least get that far to share that with you, and just to see what that looks like and share that with you, and get some suggestions, because it is going to be a little bit different than what we've had before. Just like what we're going to be asking teachers and students, we're not going back to the way that it was. I mean, it's going to be a gradual experience. So I feel like I have enough information to go back, create that, and bring that back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Breggy. Okay, and the last item on the agenda that I wanted to talk to you about, you know, when I started on the school board, I was the liaison to the Health and Safety Commission. And then my second and third year, I started to attend the Human Relations Commission. And so, and in thinking of the end of my tenure on the school board, I wanted to just attend those commission meetings one more time in November, and just see if, you know, and just kind of say goodbye and thank you to the commissions where I had my first engagement on my official capacity as a board member. And so I want to share that with you and ask if that would be okay with the board, if you would, you know, if I could do that. So that's why I'm bringing it up, just for November. So
Yes.
Does anyone have any problems with that? I know it's not a vote, it's just a discussion item.
I don't know, I have a question, but I think Mr. Spitz, you're before me.
I'm not sure. He's fine. Mrs. Walker-Schuman.
Are you planning on giving a report, or you're going to be making a comment in public?
No. I would go and just do a report for the district. So instead of Mrs. Marcus and instead of you going, I'd like to go and just finish off on that note. Well, just for the month of November.
Okay.
Well, I have no problem with it. I think it's a wonderful idea. You're going to take, I get a Monday off.
Thank you. So if you can just send me, I don't remember what days the Human Relations Commission, is it Thursday? Oh, and I wanted to invite, I actually when I started going to the Human Relations Commission, and at some point to the Health and Safety Commission, I took a board member with me, the student board member. So Mr. Kashanian, I would love to introduce you to the group. And I remember taking Jonathan Artel, and he took another student from ASB, and they discussed the activities and the student engagement opportunities that they were developing at Beverly Hills High School. So if you would like to come with me, I would love for you to be part of that so that I can introduce you. I think it's great for you all to be part of that. So we can
Sure.
talk. We can talk
Yeah,
offline.
I'd love to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Virtual.
Virtually, of course, it's all virtual, but I think it'd be great to have you. Thank you. And that's it. I think this was a great meeting. Thank you all for coming and for being actively
Hey, I have
involved.
a little bit of report. Do we
Oh,
give a
yes,
report?
yes. Let's go around for the communication, Mrs. Marcus.
Very
Go ahead.
late, but
you know what? Let's start with Mr. Margot and Mr. Kashani. Do you have anything, closing comments or?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Students, Spirit Week is this week. Yesterday was Mini Me Monday. Today is Task Tuesday, which entails joining the Among Us game that happened today from 5 to 6 and posting a picture on social media. Tomorrow is Wallpaper Wednesday, so students can add festive Zoom backgrounds. Thursday is Throwback Thursday. Students are encouraged to post a picture of a previous Halloween on social media. And lastly, Friday is Fang Friday. So students are encouraged to dress up as vampires in support of our theater's Dracula production. Nice. Next, Candy Ward donations are happening this Friday outside of the high school. So if you have any candy you want to donate, make sure to go donate and support your grade. And lastly, mock elections are coming up and the polls will be up on November 2nd and 3rd. Oh, and one more thing. We have another Chefing It Up event coming up on November 10th. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Kashani. Mr. Margo?
Thank you. It occurs to me as we get close to Halloween this year, as in a very kind of Nightmare Before Christmas, Grinch thing going on here, is our kids are just on a daily basis being robbed of the experiences they should be having. But everybody should be reminded that we're all going through this together. We like to think that we are unique or our specific situation is. It's not. There are people all over the world experiencing this, and for the most part, a lot worse than we are. So I think it's important to keep things in perspective as a community, be lucky for what we have, be lucky for our health, those that we have it, and try to do what we can to suppress this thing so that we can try to get our students back to a more normal existence. I won't say a normal existence, I will just say a more normal existence. And I would also stress that there are a lot of avenues for families, students, and parents to talk to people about what they're going through, and they need to take advantage of that. So we have discussed several times in our meetings about the Norman 8 Center and the Maple Center. It's just a friendly community, a PSA, and look at it that. I'm doing a public service announcement. Take advantage of those resources to keep your minds healthy and clear as we navigate through this pandemic. And of course, please remember the importance of next Tuesday, which you're expecting me to say one thing, but I'm going to say it's actually my birthday. So I'll leave it at that.
You say that every year, Mr. Margo. How does that happen?
It happened.
Okay.
It happened twice. It happened twice in the last 5 years.
No, but I mean, you announce your birthday every year. I don't know how that happens every year.
It's a very important day.
Yeah.
It's my twin brother's birthday.
You said the same thing last. Yeah.
There you go.
I know. Okay. Let's see. Who's next? Mrs. Walker. Oh, Mr. Spitz. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about the teacher spotlight we heard tonight. I thought that report from those teachers was so impressive and so exciting, because what they did was they reacted to an existential challenge, and they not only replicated in-class delivery of their programs, their educational program, but they even more, they developed new and improved methodologies. It's just amazing to me what they've accomplished, and as a member of the school board, I'm in awe, really in awe of their accomplishments. salute them and I thank them. And the other thing I want to say about that is, this is the kind of information that the district should be disseminating to the entire community. And just to have it in the board minutes leaves out the vast majority of the community. The, the, the families who have their kids in private schools, the Beverly Hills families who have their kids in private schools, by and large, I don't think that they're watching our meetings. And by and large, they don't know about some of these great things that are happening in our schools. So I really would like to see this kind of information disseminated to the entire community. I think it could even be done in a way that recipients would be able to access the videotape of the presentation. It's so impressive. And it's what we need to do to invite those kids back into our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker-Schuman. Mrs. Marcus has to leave. So is it okay if she goes first and then we can go back to you?
Sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus.
Thank you. First of all, the disadvantage of going last, or almost last, Mel, you took the words right out of my mouth, because that was one of the things that I was really going to compliment, was that presentation tonight. I found that superlative. And I really thank you for covering it for me. I don't have to say anything. You did it for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Spitz. And I would like to just make a comment about my meeting with the Health and Safety Commission this week that I went to. I want you to know that they are really, the police report there really was amazing, because they are tightening up security like unbelievable for the next week surrounding Halloween and the election day. They are bringing in SWAT team. They're bringing in another, they've hired NASTEC. They've hired another security firm. They are bringing in security that is going to be unbelievable to protect the city for the next 10 days. I think it's on, but starting with Halloween. Halloween night, Rodeo Drive is absolutely closed. It will not be open for any purpose. You can't drive down it. You can't walk down it. They have really, as far as the security and what they're doing with the city and closing the streets, it's amazing. But one of the things that they did do with the community services, and this is very important, because there's no trick or treating and things like that, they've created a website of activities for the kids for Halloween. And there's a lot of things going on the website that they showed us, that it's for all age groups. They even have a trivia contest, and they are really vamping up to give the kids something to do at home or around the house for the Halloween. And you can get the information on the website for Beverly Hills, so the kids can go there and participate with activities at home. So I just wanted to share that. Those are the two things that I came away with this week's health and safety. And it's been a wonderful time going to those meetings. I've enjoyed it, and depends on what the future brings. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcus.
I have to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker.
So I just want to give everyone an update. Dodgers win.
Yay.
I was recording the game.
Timing was really
Thanks.
good on that one. Sorry. So for the sake of brevity, I concur with everything my colleagues have said before me tonight. Thank you for all of the presentations. This was a huge amount of information. It was a great teacher spotlight. I think these were really robust and meaningful discussions. And go Dodgers, go Blue. I'm very excited. And everybody go vote, please.
Thank you. And I will also just say, you know, I won't add more to it, but I just wanted to say thank you to the staff, the presentations today. The spotlight was excellent. And I also want to add, the Lakers also won. I don't think we really took notice of that or mentioned it, but go Los Angeles. We've done very well this year. So all the best to everyone. Thank you for tonight. I thought it was meaningful and productive. And we'll see each other soon. Be well.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.